We should be in a position to look at what can be done to ensure that we release traffic on our roads that is as a result of freight and logistics.
Thank you. We move to question 540 as to the Minister of Public Enterprises by the Honorable Kachalia of the DA. Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Chairperson. Before I answer Honorable Kachalia's question, let me confirm that we are at one with Minister Mbalula on the question of transferring goods from road to rail, and Transnet is certainly taking that into account in its business planning, and we'll see progress in that regard over the next year or so. In respect of Mr. Kachalia's question, we have received a considerable number of expressions of interest from potential financial institutions and other private equity partners and airline operators. These have been submitted to a transaction advisor for both assessment and engagement with these parties. The process has reached an advanced stage, and we expect the process to be concluded by late December, early January, or early 2021. Due to the sensitive commercial nature of these negotiations, we are unable to pronounce at this stage on the details of the expressions of interest. However, at the appropriate time, this outcome will be communicated. Notwithstanding this, notwithstanding the current and past difficulties of SAA, it must be noted that SAA has a highly credible reputation, both across the African continent and globally, and this clearly is an attractive proposition for the many expressions of interest that we've had. In relation to the second part of the question, in terms of SAA's debt and restructuring costs, as I've indicated before, the private equity partners have indicated very clearly that they will not take on any of these responsibilities. Therefore, it is a matter for the government to ensure that all these liabilities are paid for, including the restructuring costs of SAA. In respect of labor, after extensive consultations and discussions with labor unions in the Labor Consultative Forum, the reduction of staff numbers, the VSP and restructuring retrenchment packages, and the retention of the necessary staff for the new airline on new conditions of service have either been agreed or canvassed. The same applies to the payment of outstanding salaries to staff. As the funds become available, these obligations will be met, some of them before the end of the year. On the question of management, an interim management team is currently being put in place with the right aviation skills. This team will, in all likelihood, be complemented by an operational team brought in by the new partner next year. And furthermore, discussions are taking place currently on the transition out of business rescue for SAA. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. I've been informed that the Chief Whip of the Opposition will take charge of the first supplementary question as asked by the Honourable Kachalia. Honourable Matsoni.
Thank you so much, Honourable Chairperson. Minister Gordon, I must say I'm happy that you agree with Minister Mbalula, and I think you should go one step further and let him take over SAA, because it belongs with transport, so it shouldn't be with public enterprise in the first place. I also agree with you that at a certain time SAA was an attractive possibility, but Dudu Mayeni messed up the Paris deal, and that's why she's sitting before the Zondo Commission, and you and I both sat and questioned her about that. So we know why SAA sits in the financial mess it's in today. So we mustn't try and paint a pretty picture when we both sat in that public enterprises hearing and we listened to the lies that came out. So now this goes on and on and on, and money just keeps getting paid out and paid out and paid out. And now we're told that there's a 10.5 billion rand bailout. But I have it on very good authority that 10.5 billion is the very conservative amount that we're looking at spending, and that in all likelihood it's going to go up to 16 billion rand that the South African taxpayer will have to fork out during the time of COVID and when we are effectively bankrupt in our country.
What is the question?
Young ladies, sit down and keep quiet. The adults are working. It would be very advisable for the Minister to be honest with the South African public and tell us now, 10.5 billion, conservative estimate, or the real cost? Because we think it's closer to 16 billion. Thank you, House Chair.
Honourable members on virtual platform, people have got time assigned to them for the questions. So don't interrupt the person on the podium. That's my duty.
Chairperson,
Yes, honourable member.
based on Rule 82, the Chief Whip has just called Honorable Shabalala a young lady. The adults are working. So basically, she's declaring her not being an adult. I think that is unparliamentary.
Honourable Mazzoni.
Thanks, House Chair. I'll withdraw. She's an older lady.
Thank you very much for withdrawing without me asking. Honourable Chabalala, please switch off your mic. Any member who interferes will be warned once, and for the second time you'll be removed from the platform. That is a warning to everybody. Thank you, Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson. I don't know what to do in respect of the honourable member's question around being honest with the South African public, because I have always been honest and frank with the South African public. So any imputation otherwise is both unparliamentary and unwelcome and untrue. Secondly, the total cost of restructuring, notwithstanding the kind of verbal gymnastics she engages in, is 14 billion rands, 10.5 of which is required currently. Thirdly, what is this money going to be used for? It's going to be used to pay the retrenchment and VSP packages of the staff. Secondly, creditors that need to be paid about 600 million rands. Thirdly, unflown ticket revenue. These are tickets that have been bought, paid for, but not utilized, as a result of which thousands of SAA customers are out of pocket, and we need to replace the funds that they've actually utilized. Fourthly, one hopes that she's done her homework, but that looks like the political rhetoric overtakes the facts. But she must say to the South African public whether it is liquidation that she prefers, because liquidation means each worker gets 32,000 rands and they go home maximum. Secondly, we lose all of the assets. Thirdly, the private sector picks up and cherry picks whatever assets it actually requires. So is the DA currently, Chairperson, working in cahoots with some airline or the other to see the demise of SAA? They must now be honest with the South African public and tell us where they stand in this particular regard. So we've been very factual and very frank in every parliamentary meeting about what these costs are about and why government has the responsibility. And in my initial response, I made that very clear also. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mampiri, ANC.
Ke a leboga modulasetulo. Mohlomongwe ke thome ka hore ba lekgotla la DA a ba emele nako ya bona e fitlha ba tle ba kgone ho tšea SAA ba ishe ka kwa go transport rena re sa buša bjalo ka lekgotla la badimo le batho modulasetulo minister ntumelele ke botšiše potšišo goba ke elane le molaotheo wa rena ke re Honorable Minister, is the recapitalization of South African Airways part of government's legal and financial obligations as part of the business rescue process? My question is that what will be the recapitalization process achieve? And secondly, what process is being followed for enlisting a strategic equity partner, and will such a strategic equity partner wants to carry the responsibility of the current debts and other liabilities of the airline? Lastly, Chair, allow me to conclude by saying, if not, then will this assist improving the balance sheet of a new structured airline? Mazoni, you must be strong. Ke a leboga modulasetulo.
Thank you. Honorable Minister.
House Chair, sorry, just a point of order. The honourable member must know that if she's going to call me Mazon, which is my surname, she must do it properly, which is Matsone, and it's honourable.
Thank you. That's not a point of order.
A se polelo ya gešo.
Honorable member, no, you don't do that. Honorable members, let's respect each other and let's understand that we are not masters of the pronunciation in our different languages. Honorable members, no, you can say it's English. We're not all good with pronunciation. Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Chair. It's actually Italian. So Mazzone is giving us a good lesson on how to pronounce Italian names. Thank you for that.
All right, ministers in the economic cluster, they're covering oral questions in the National Assembly. We heard from Transport Minister Fikile Mbalula earlier on, focusing on rail infrastructure, and I believe Minister Pravin Gordhan is focusing on Airways. Let's take a break. Headlines at the top of the hour, then we catch up.
Invariably in the closure of a business and the losses that I've talked about earlier on, and which somehow escapes the attention of many people. Secondly, as I indicated earlier as well, no partner is willing to pay the historic costs of an airline and what they would call a cleaning up costs. And in that regard, as I pointed out, government has to bear the responsibility as the shareholder. Thirdly, these amounts are not about recapitalization of the airline itself, but there will be further work done in relation to ensuring that the two primary subsidiaries, SAA Technical and Mango, are also undergoing some process of restructuring in order to put them on a sound financial and operational footing. And lastly, cleaning up these costs and bringing about a cleaner SAA arising out of the business rescue process clearly makes the airline more profitable, more attractive to a partner, but also increases the value proposition of SAA to the partners with whom ultimately we will conclude the discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The Honorable Mautwe of the EFF.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. Minister Jamnandas, it will be a year in just over 3 weeks since the business rescue practitioners
House Chairperson,
were
on a point
appointed
of
to-
order.
Yes, Honorable.
that
Honorable Mautwe.
logical
House Chair,
Honorable Mautwe.
it would be a bit critical of me not to rise on a point of order. If someone has just addressed me incorrectly in the House and I have something to say, then someone must address the Minister correctly. And it is Minister Gordhan. And that is how you pronounce his name, and that is his only name. And it is very rude and unparliamentary to call him anything other.
Honorable members, we know what the rule says in terms of that, the dignity of...
Jamnandas.
Honorable member, I'm speaking. Honorable Mautwe, We know what the rules are saying. We don't have any minister, I don't even know what was said. It's not in my records. Please stick to what we know as the names of the honorable members. In respect, you can call them Minister Godan or Mr. Godan. Continue.
I know him to be Minister Jamnandas. Well, if you don't know that name, that's a problem. I know him to be Jamnandas.
Okay, we don't address each other in first names, if that is what you are referring to. That also is out of order.
It will be a year in just over 3 weeks since the business rescue practitioners were appointed to SAA. And the truth is that any sensible and logical assessment of their performance would show
On a
that,
point of order, Chair.
that SAA is not in any better
On a point of order, Chair.
than it was in 2019 December. By March, business rescue practitioners
Chair,
were
on
paid
point of
well
order,
over
Chair.
30 million, and you can only imagine now how much money they've been paid so far. What confidence do you have,
Chair, on the point of order, Chair.
I'm coming to you, Honorable
will have the
Ring.
competence to handle a transaction?
On a point of
Yes.
order, Chairman.
Chairperson.
Chair,
Honorable
House Chair.
Mautwe, Honorable Mautwe,
Yeah.
Honorable Thring, you know, when you come from the platform and somebody's speaking, it's difficult to really catch it first sight. Can I allow you to come up with your point of order, if that's a point of order, Honorable Thring?
House Chair, I think that when the former point of order was raised, it was with regards to the name calling of the minister. There was no retraction, there was no apology, but the member continued to speak as if she did not hear what you had actually said. Now, if someone calls a member of parliament by another name other than what we are required to in terms of the rules, there ought to be an apology or a retraction before they continue. Thank you, Chair.
On a point of order, Chair.
No, point of order, Chair. Please.
His name is Jamnatas Godan. What is this thing?
Honorable members. Honorable members of the EFF, stop pressing that thing. I want to make a ruling. Stop. Honorable members, I said it is unparliamentary to call a person on first name basis because I did not know that name. That was a caution to to Honorable Mautwe. And I'm not going to be forced to, because I gave a caution, to be forced to say, Honorable Mautwe, you must withdraw. Honorable Mautwe, can you conclude your question? And don't do that because it was a question, it's in the rules that we don't call each other on first name basis. And I gave you options. So that was my ruling. Continue, Honorable Mautwe.
Thank you for the protection. Mr. Wayne must go and read the rules and stop waffling here. Minister, so what confidence do you have that the business rescue practitioners will have the competence to handle a transaction with potential private equity partners? And can you guarantee that government will remain a majority shareholder of SAA after entering into a transaction with a possible private equity partners? I thank you, House Chair.
Thank you. I want, before the minister responds, to tell everybody who will come to the platform and call members wrongly, not in accordance with what the rules are saying, know that there will be consequences. This was the warning.
Thank you, House Chair. I'd like to rise on a point of order.
Yes.
Mr. Thring is entitled to raise a point of order. It was a valid point of order, and I object to the aspersion that he was waffling. We are honourable members of the House, and the honourable member from the EFF said he must read the rules and stop waffling. He applied the rules correctly, House Chair. So I would ask you to rule that that is out of order, to say a member is waffling and doesn't know the rules.
Yes, what is waffling?
Chairperson.
Wait, I'm still busy on the issue.
Chair, waffling means speaking aimlessly and not to a point, and I don't believe that is correct.
But who said you must speak?
Honorable,
Who gave you the permission?
Honorable members, I have my advisors here. If the English beats me, not knowing what waffling is, I ask for their advice. Please, don't do what you are doing. Honorable Minister, can you continue? I take that as no point of order. Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Chair. I'm quite used to these things, so don't worry. The first question by the questioner was about the BRPs and the fact that they spent a year. That is true. The second is, does one have confidence that they are going to deal properly and negotiate with an SEP? Well, if the questioner was listening carefully, Chairperson, I would have said very clearly in my initial response that we have a transaction advisor, not the BRPs, who are dealing with the SEP question. And perhaps that detail escaped the person who asked the question. Will the state be a majority shareholder? We haven't reached that stage yet in the negotiations. When we do, we will let the public know. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Sengwa, IFP.
No, thank you very much, Honorable House Chairperson. Honorable Minister, to use a phrase that you used earlier on of verbal gymnastics, the same can be said about the business rescue practitioners on the many occasions that you've interacted with them on a simple question. How much are they costing SAA with the processes which they are following? One report in one of the newspapers speaks to 169 million rands, but that's just a media report. We have time and time again sought this information from the business rescue practitioners, and we have not received it. So, Honorable Minister, can you now this afternoon inform us how much are the business rescue practitioners costing South Africa for the work that they've been doing for the past 11 months, and whether any money has been paid to them so far, or if not, when it will be. But the fundamental issue is this exercise is becoming costly, and in the absence of knowing how much it is, it makes it even more problematic to trust whether things are moving at the speed that it should, or there are delays for the continued milking of the public purse, which is already strained. So, Minister, how much is the business rescue practitioners costing us?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable Slengwa is correct. This issue has been raised both by myself and himself and other members in the committee, which is called SCOPA. And on the last occasion, a few days ago, the BRP said they would supply the information. Apparently, they have sent it to the department. I've asked the department for the information. It could well amount to the figure that Honorable Slengwa mentioned. But in the course of the afternoon, Chairperson, as soon as I get the number, I will certainly communicate that with your permission to Mr. Slengwa. At the moment, I just don't have that number.
Thank you.
And as you know, once the BRP's business rescue practitioners take over a business in business rescue, they're only accountable to themselves at the end of the day. So in the first instance, they had a post-commencement finance when business rescue started on the 6th of December 2019 of about 5.5 billion rands, and they have collected their fees in that regard, and some amount was made known to SCOPA at that stage, but it was a small amount, I think 60 or 80 billion rands. But Mr. Slengwa is absolutely right that the number will be far more substantial now. But as I said, I will revert as soon as I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. We move to question 500, asked by the Honorable Thring to the Minister of Public Works. The Honorable the Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. The answer is no. I was informed by the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure.
Your ballot is insufficient.
that they cannot implement any consequence management steps in respect of the 48 million rand spent on the construction of the Jersey barrier wall because the department did not mandate this project. I was further informed that on the 10th of July 2018, KwaZulu-Natal Department of Transport approached DPWI to request funding as border control and associated infrastructure is a national competence and not provincial function. The KZN department then made available 50 million rand towards the infrastructure to fortify the borderline with the understanding that DPWI will reimburse the funds subject to 1, the conclusion of our MOU, and 2, a comprehensive project report by KwaZulu-Natal Department to be assessed by the construction branch of DPWI to validate the work done. Up till to date, neither have the MOU been concluded and no reimbursement has been paid to the KZN department. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The Honorable Friend.
Thank you, House Chair. When members of the Portfolio Committee of the Public Works and Infrastructure paid an oversight visit to the Cozy Bay border post, it revealed a repetition of the mistakes made at Bay Bridge border post. The KZN Department of Transport has usurped the role of Public Works. No MOAs were concluded. There was no EIA in place, and 85 million was awarded for the construction of an 8-kilometer reinforced concrete barrier at a cost of some 10 million per kilometer. And while one understands that this is necessary because of the criminal activities that are taking place in that particular area of the border, the majority of the committee decided on an internal investigation. The ACDP, however, has called for an external investigation, like you did, Minister, for the Bay Bridge border post. The question then, Minister, is how far down the line is this investigation, and do you support an external or an internal investigation? I thank you.
Thank you. The Honorable Minister.
Honourable thank you for that question. Honourable Chair and Honourable Tring, when I became aware of this, I wanted to find out that if the DPWI made that commitment of 50 million, it should have been somewhere in the budget. And then by December last year, I was told that indeed there is a 50 million rand to refund the KZN department. When the Portfolio Committee went for the oversight, I sent DPWI officials with them, and where we are now, it is still subject to the signing of the MOU. I have put a timeline to the Acting Director General and to the Construction Deputy Director General that they must now conclude this matter one way or the other, because it's been too long outstanding, and we must conclude it before the end of this financial year if that 50 million is within DPWI. And certainly I have asked the Anti-Corruption Unit to launch an investigation to find out what exactly went on there, because the one is pushing it to the other. And yes, it will be an internal investigation by the Anti-Corruption Unit within the DPWI. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Mam Shabalala from the ANC on virtual platform. Honorable Shabalala, LF.
Honorable Chairperson, hello.
Siyabuza Kubega, ma.
Honorable Chairperson, I would like to ask for the question from the Minister. How will her department utilize the extended public works program?
lost you. Switch off your video and try to ask the question. Honorable Shabalala.
Yes.
Vali video yakho uzame ukukhuluma ungayivulanga ngoba yakhala. I-network yakho ayisi right.
Should I close my video?
Bengi-advise njalo ngoba ngizwa ukhatha ma.
Okay, all right, let me close it. Excuse me, Chairperson.
Yes.
Can I continue?
Yes.
Contribute to the alleviation of poverty and unemployment, given the plight faced by many in adverse economic circumstances. I thank you.
I'm not sure if the minister has heard the question. Have you, Minister?
Yes, I did hear the
Okay,
question.
thank you.
Honorable Shabalala wanted to know how many EPWP work opportunities were created. But since the project was conducted by the Department of Transport and KZN, I can certainly request that information from them. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Mam Shabalala, icime vela, mute your gadget in a sound ezwakalayo. Okay. Thank you. The Honorable Graham. DA.
Thank you, House Chair. Minister, you've kind of answered the question, but not entirely. So with respect to the 50 million, there was a letter from the Director General of Public Works and Infrastructure directed to the MEC of Transport in KZN in December 2019. And in that letter, the Director General said that they had managed to find the 50 million from various sources within the department budget, and that on that basis, the project could go ahead and that the KZN department could then obviously expect a refund pending the outcome of the MOA and sign off by National Treasury. Now, that was in the previous financial year, and as we can glean from the letter, that money was sourced from various areas, so it wasn't a 50 million rand line item. My question then is, we're now in a new financial year. What guarantees have we got that that 50 million rand is still available? Was it rolled over? Has it been put somewhere safe? Or has that money now just disappeared? Thank you.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Graham, for the question. This will certainly form part of the investigation that we must launch. As we know that the previous Director General is currently not there, but we will investigate and find out and come back to the Honourable Member. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mhlonitshwa ilungu elihloniphekileko lendlu ubaba uSingh.
Ngiyabonga Hlalo. Good afternoon. Honourable Minister, it has come to light that the KZN Department of Public Works spent over 2 million rand per year on private consultant, when the department has over 20 senior permanent officials that could provide the same service. Now, the whole question of outsourcing, even by your department, the provincial department, is brought into question here. As part of the MOU, will there be any intention of terminating this costly 3-year contract? And what is your specific view on this hire of consultants and your general view on the hire of consultants by the department? Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. The hiring of consultants certainly is very costly to government. We have to almost pay double when we have employed the technical people to do some of the work. But that is a broader question of cost reduction within government to reduce the amount and the amount of consultants that we are using. On the question of whether we can terminate it, the contract was entered into by the KZN, the Department of Transport, with the contractors that were on site. I was briefed when the portfolio committee returned that even there some of the procedures were not properly followed. What was supposed to have been completed is not completed. So it's better to leave all of these allegations for further investigation so that they can be tested. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Minister. We move to question 523, asked by the Honorable Mantashe to the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition. The Minister is in the House.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson, and good afternoon to everyone. Increasing the level of localization in the South African economy is critical to creating jobs, providing opportunities for local firms, and building an inclusive economy. By localization, we mean products made and services produced here in South Africa. Every year, South Africa spends about 25% of its wealth on imported products. These are goods made by businesses in other parts of the world, creating jobs and attracting investment outside our borders. Now, some of this, of course, we can't produce in South Africa, and we need to trade with the rest of the world, but many more products can be produced locally. The economic argument for increased levels of manufactured goods is very clear. According to the Industrial Development Corporation, the manufacturing sector has the highest GDP multiplier of all sectors of the economy. For every 3 rand, for every 1 rand that we spend, we get 3 rand of additional output. For every 1 manufacturing job created, 4 other jobs are sustained in the economy. The small size of our domestic market is a challenge to produce goods competitively, and the Continental Free Trade Area is an opportunity to expand our market and give us the economies of scale we need. I want to identify just a few of the measures we're putting in place to drive the localization agenda. First, focusing on sector master plans to improve competitiveness and localization. Since implementing the poultry master plans, more than 1 million additional chickens a week have been produced locally in the first 8 months of this year. We commenced with the sugar master plan discussions last year. From January this year, deep sea sugar imports are down by 16% compared to a year ago. There's similar progress in other master plans. Second, we're working to secure greater levels of investment for localization. The next South African Investment Conference will be held on 18 November this year, and honourable members may want to take note that at the 2018 Investment Conference, Aspen Pharmacare, a South African pharmaceutical firm, made commitments of 3.3 billion rand in fresh investment. That was in 2018. 2 weeks ago, a major US company, Johnson & Johnson, announced that the new facility in Nelson Mandela Bay would be a manufacturing hub for a COVID vaccine manufactured here on the African continent, the first of its kind. Third, we're focusing competition policy on localization in accordance with the legislation. To boost greater level of localization and beneficiation of key metals, the Competition Tribunal recently attached conditions to the sale of a vanadium mine project in Mpumalanga, which will ensure that the vanadium ore is supplied first to South African beneficiaries before it can be exported. And this is important because this metal has potential for application in large-scale battery storage infrastructure, and South Africa is primed to take advantage of this. Fourth, we're promoting localization through the infrastructure program. It involves getting more products in the supply chain, such as cement and steel, bought from local companies. And finally, to support these efforts, we'll step up our Buy Local campaign through Proudly South Africa, build greater levels of export to the rest of the African continent, and work with companies and public enterprises to improve monitoring and reporting of what companies are doing to drive localization. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Mantashe. Honorable Mantashe from the virtual platform.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. We appreciate the presentation by the Minister in his department facilitating localization, but we're interested to know what measures are available through state procurement to drive localization. what are some of the challenges that he foresees and what is being considered for the future? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mantash, for the question. State procurement, of course, is a fundamental driver of localization. The modern state, South Africa, but everywhere else in the world, is a huge consumer of goods and services. We buy uniforms for soldiers, we buy food for hospitals, we buy linen, we buy products in schools and so on. And there's a number of legal instruments available to us. It's the triple PFA, which is the legislation governing procurement, which has regulations to enable the designation of a product. So if the state designates as paper, for example, it means paper may only be bought from local producers. Secondly, there's the NEDLAC agreement that was reached recently, in which business and labor backed our efforts to deepen the localization of public procurement. Third, there's the infrastructure investment program. Minister De Lille has been meeting with me to identify products that can be localized here in South Africa. What are some of the challenges, Honorable Mantash? The critical challenge is to ensure compliance and monitoring in the supply chain, to ensure that you don't have corruption taking over where people use front companies to import goods and pass it off as locally made. So we're jacking up our efforts in that regard. And from next year, we're going to be requesting that enterprises should publish the level of localization as well as the steps they're taking to lift up localization. And I'm sure all members of parliament across all parties would want to support the Proudly South Africa, the Buy Local campaign. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. The Honorable Covert.
Honourable Minister, there is no doubt that the steel industry will play a major role in government's R1 trillion it has committed to infrastructure development as a part of the economic recovery plan. However, the steel industry is currently under immense strain as a result of government's cosy relationship with ArcelorMittal SA. Some may refer to this relationship as a prime case of corporate welfare. Nonetheless, this relationship has had severe implications on the price, quality, and availability of steel in the South African market. Could the Minister please explain why the International Trade Administration Commission, ITAC, decided to unilaterally extend safeguard duties on hot-rolled steel products, and why you failed to consult stakeholders in the industry?
Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chairperson. I think let me start by saying to Honourable Cuthbert that I would like to share some alternative storyline with you that I hope you can see this as a basis to go forward. Let me start with the importance of steel in every manufactured-driven economy. Steel is the foundation of industrialization. Across the world, whether it's a Japan or a China in Asia, whether it is a Brazil or Argentina in Latin America, whether it's United States in North America, whether it's Germany or France in Europe, everybody wants to make sure they have a primary steel-making capability. We have a relatively small portion of global steel output on the African continent. We account for 17% of global population as Africa, but only 1% of global output. So we can't risk giving that up. ArcelorMittal is the dominant player upstream. The Competition Commission has done an investigation into practices by ArcelorMittal. It imposed a fine of 1.5 billion rand on ArcelorMittal, the biggest in our history yet, hardly a cozy relationship. It put a price curb on ArcelorMittal that they may only charge up to 10% of EBIT as the pricing formula because there's a monopoly upstream. Hardly the example of a cozy relationship. It compelled ArcelorMittal to commit to significant fresh investment to improve the competitiveness of the company. Hardly an example of cozy relationships. So what we need to do is, there's no question about it, we need more competition in upstream steel, and we need to see the job potential of downstream beneficiation. That's absolutely the case. And so we've worked now with steel mini mills. We have a number of them coming up, taking some of the work from the large integrated mills. And that's what competition is about, creating more dynamism in the economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mamiako, EFF.
Chairperson, I'll take it.
Thank you. Continue.
Thanks, Chair. Minister, this question is extremely misleading and misguided. There has not been any effort to reindustrialize South Africa since the crisis of manufacturing sector in the early 90s. There is no political will and there is no technical competence to reindustrialize South Africa. We remain an exporter of raw material and importer of finished goods. We import majority of products in our shelf space in majority of major retail shops in this country. If there are these measures that the minister talks about, factories that he claims we have that produce finished goods, besides assembling of cars and some food processing, can the minister give us a list of just five products that we produce in South Africa and form part of majority of products in that category in major shops? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much for the question. Honorable Member, I think if you ask me for 5, it would be too few. Let me give you just a number of examples and the Chair will indicate to me when I run out of time. So let me start with the fact that cell phones historically were not made in South Africa. We worked with a local company in Durban Port in KwaZulu-Natal to have that assembled in South Africa. Let me take the example of the suit that I'm wearing, which is a clothing product. This suit is made here in South Africa. Let me take the example of beverages. The appetizer juice is something that is proudly produced here in South Africa. The technology and innovation was developed here. Let me take the example of CPAP masks that are used when patients are needing oxygen during ventilation. We've now produced 20,000 of those products here. Let me take the example of fridges that are used by households to cool down their food and so on. Those fridges are made here in Atlantis by a company called Hisense. Let me take the example of trucks. So let me leave cars out, trucks. I've been to many truck operators where the trucks are assembled here in South Africa. Let me take the example of pens and stationery that are made here in South Africa. So there are a large number of examples of South Africa making goods. Must we do more? Absolutely. That's where I agree completely with the Honourable Member. And my colleague, the Minister of Small Business Development, and I are working very closely with the rest of our Cabinet colleagues in driving an agenda of localization and industrialization. And how are we doing this? We're working with other African countries. 3 weeks ago, I chaired a meeting with Botswana, Namibia, Lesotho, Eswatini, to look at how can we build local value chains here in Southern Africa and use that as a platform to export manufactured goods to the rest of the world. And that agreement we hope to capture in the African Continental Free Trade Area modalities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Thring, you are the last on this question to ask a follow-up question.
Thank you, House Chair. Minister, South Africa is known to be rich in a variety of minerals. In addition to diamonds and gold, the country also contains reserves of iron ore, platinum, manganese, chromium, copper, uranium, silver, beryllium, and titanium. The Bushveld complex is said to be to hold the world's most valuable minerals. Our problem, Minister, is that we seem to remain stuck in the colonial era of exporting our valuable raw minerals.
We lost you, Honorable Thring. Honorable Thring? Honorable Thring, we lost you. Honorable Swar, do you have the question maybe just to assist?
Let's see if we... I don't have
House
the-
Chair, I seem to be back.
Okay, continue. You have 23 seconds left.
All right, thank you, House Chair. House Chair, let me conclude then by saying that localization and beneficiation are twin powerhouse economic tools that can be used to generate enormous wealth and jobs in South Africa. So besides the few minerals currently beneficiated like vanadium, can the Minister elaborate on the long-term plan, if any, to increase the beneficiation of key minerals? And what are those minerals, as this can certainly enhance localization? Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Tring. You make a very important point, that what colonialism was all about is Africa being turned simply into a supplier of raw materials for industry elsewhere in the world. And our work now on the continental free trade area is to break that pattern, to have a made in Africa, grown in Africa, dug in Africa strategy. So what are some of the practical things we're doing? Let me take one example that was raised in the list of metals that Honorable Tring mentioned, and that is platinum. Platinum is a critical feedstock into fuel cell power generation. So we've recently, a few months ago, worked with a company called Chem Energy, and they've opened a high-tech, state-of-the-art manufacturing facility in KwaZulu-Natal to manufacture fuel cell power generators. 70 to 80% of that will be localization, and they'll be supporting about 300 sites for the Vodacom network for the generation of power using this. And it can also provide power to households, to schools, to clinics, and so on. And the investment, of course, is quite critical because it combines innovation, the use of South African metals, and South African skills. Let me take a second example, which is the one of chrome. It's also a metal that you've mentioned. My colleague, Minister Gwede Mantashe, has announced recently a set of policy measures to deepen the beneficiation of chrome. South Africa is the biggest exporter of raw chrome in the world. And yet there are opportunities here for deepening the ferrochrome industry, which is the first stage of transformation of chrome. Let me take a third example that is significant, and that is the Bushveld complex that you referred to. A company called Bushveld Mineral and Energy is involved in the mining and in the production of vanadium. And it's now established an 8 million liter vanadium electrolyte manufacturing plant in the East London Industrial Development Zone. So coming back to the overall strategy that you raised, the strategy is to attract investment to South Africa, to bring technology and know-how, to convert raw materials into increasing levels of finished goods. What are some of the constraints? The most significant one is the price and availability of energy. Because when you transform metal to something else, it's the application of heat and heat technologies to the metal that give you the ability to shape that. And so we're working with my colleague, Praveen Gordon, to address this issue. So yes, you are absolutely right that we must break with that colonial pattern of trade, and we are serious about it. There are some areas of real progress being made, and we want to be able to do more. And if we can get the energy issue cracked, then we will be able, in fact, to do a significant amount more. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. As I welcome Honorable Frolick, I just want to say the next question is question number 517, asked to the Minister of Public Works by the Honorable Njobo. The Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, and thank you to Honorable Njobo for the question. I will send a full written question and a reply and just summarize, Chairperson. The end of May 2020, Cabinet approved the Infrastructure Investment Plan, and this was the prelude to the Economic Recovery and Reconstruction Plan. And in this plan, we do recognize many things that we must do to enhance job creation within the infrastructure industry. So the plan recognized the massive underspending of infrastructure by government and state-owned entities, also the decimation of skills in the sector, and just the execution of infrastructure projects. So having said that, and also, of course, the maintenance and repairs of our infrastructure. So the plan focused on the following areas: the creation of financial and technical engineering capacity in government. We are working with the state-owned entities and other government departments, as well as the private sector, to co-create a credible infrastructure pipeline.
Honourable Minister, I want to request the Honourable Kubeka, Nomsa Kubeka, to switch off a microphone because she's disrupting your reply to this question. You may now continue, Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Also, the development of the National Infrastructure Plan 2045. This will see a 25-year horizon planning instrument that will signal to investors and lenders a positive signal that we want to revive the construction industry. And also the plan wants to improve skills and job creation with specific reference to broad-based Black economic empowerment, women, youth, and people with disability. The National Development Plan, the National Plan for 2045, key to it that we recognize is the spatial injustices of the past, and that we have to bring about that. Then the third part of the plan is the crowd in private sector participation in the rollout of the public sector infrastructure. And this regard, government has established the infrastructure fund, and we are already looking at alternative funding mechanism, also like green infrastructure bonds. We've also initiated the policy and regulatory reforms that are necessary to propel infrastructure development and funding, and addresses the mechanism to fast-track infrastructure development. Some of the public sector policies and regulations have unintended consequences of delaying and derailing investments at great cost to the economy, and we need to have a robust, transparent decision-making process in place. We also, in the plan, re-look at the public sector infrastructure institutional framework, and therefore Cabinet approved the establishment of a single entry point for infrastructure in our country called ISA. We also need to optimize state property, land and buildings portfolios to ensure that we ensure long-term functionality and viability, and also how do we sweat the state assets to create more investment in our country. Also, in terms of my performance agreement, I've signed with the President, we are required to ensure that infrastructure investment contributes 23% of GDP, with 15% contribution from the private sector and 8% from the public sector. Lastly, with regards to the job creation in the plan that we have gazetted earlier in July, we are projecting that during the construction and operations, we will create more than 400,000 jobs over several financial years. And we will be paying special attention to spatial transformation, localization, as Minister Patel is saying, the use of local material, local labor, as well as to empower women-owned enterprises and cooperatives. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. I now request the Honourable Njobo to put the supplementary question to the Minister. The Honourable Njobo.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Minister. As part of the infrastructure investment, 62 projects were then gazetted as strategic integrated projects in July 2020. What is the nature of SIP 29 and its economic benefits, which is undertaken by the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure And what level of employment is expected from these projects? Ngiyabonga.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson. If I can just, yes, there are 62 strategic infrastructure projects gazetted. If she can just make a reference to SIP 29, what project that is, then I can answer. Sorry for that. I don't have my list with me now.
Honourable Member, do you have the information with you? Honourable Jobo?
No, Chairperson, I don't have. That is why I'm asking.
Okay, I will certainly send a written reply to her. I don't want to guess. I do suspect it could be the urban management or the rural bridges or even the rural roads, but I will send a written reply, Honourable Chairperson, to the member. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The second supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, the Economic Recovery Plan has spoken of 800,000 jobs and job opportunities in the speeches that you've been giving, but you've just made reference to 400,000, so I'm not quite sure why there's a disparity there. But the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure is the custodian of EPWP. And despite a contractual obligation between the department and the IDT for EPWP jobs in the non-state sector NPO program, it took pressure from the Portfolio Committee, legal action and protest action from the NPO sector to force the department to proceed with the program, which should have commenced in April of this year. 55,000 people have not had work opportunities for 7 months. What guarantee, Minister, can you give us that there will be no similar stumbling blocks to prevent the promised 400 or 800,000 jobs from being realized?
Honourable Minister, before you reply, may I request the members on the virtual platform to mute their microphones until they are recognized, because it is causing a disturbance in terms of the members asking the follow-up questions and the Minister that must reply to it. Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. There's a difference between the 800,000 mass public employment programs that were announced by the President on the 15th of October. And for that, in the Portfolio Committee, we had explained that some of the strategic infrastructure projects will also contribute towards the mass public employment program. But the jobs created in the construction industry, if you look at 50 of the strategic projects, will be carried out by the private sector. And that is the more than 400,000 jobs that I'm speaking about, and not the mass public employment program. So that is the difference. And again, I've told the Portfolio Committee that on a monthly basis, on the 15th of November now, we will give an update on the mass public employment programs every month, because National Treasury made available 12.6 billion rand for the mass public employment programs. For some of the other SIPs that will be funded by the private sector, there we've received 430 billion rand for infrastructure. So it's two different sets of jobs that I was referring to. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The third supplementary question is to be asked by the Honourable Sowisa.
Thank you very much, Chair. I will take it.
Please proceed.
Thanks, Honourable Chair. Minister, your department, together with National Treasury, recently signed an MOU with Development Bank of Southern Africa for the establishment of the Infrastructure Fund. Minister, the whole point, according to my understanding, is to boost infrastructural development. In terms of the MOU, Minister, when will this infrastructure fund be operational? And you have just mentioned that it will also create jobs in the country, which we all look up to. But Minister, can you please clarify this issue of creating a job in terms of your department, while the workers there in Parliament who are doing maintenance that have been there more than 10 years are going to be jobless as from 18 of November 2020, and they're under your department. The department does not even consider them to be insourced. They are going to lose their job. So which is which, Minister? We are going to create jobs with this fund while the department is not taking care of the workers that are also within the system. So are you saying, Minister, those who have been having jobs, they must be retrenched, and then you are going to promise us that there will be more jobs? So please clarify, because we are very confused as a nation, Minister. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Minister.
I can assure Honourable Sawisa, I'm not confused, so don't count me in there. First of all, the MOU with the DBSA that was signed recently. It was signed for the infrastructure fund. Already government has committed 100 billion rand to the infrastructure fund over 10 years. The role of DBSA will be to find more private sector funding to get into the fund so they can become a blended fund. So that is what we've signed with DBSA, and that's the government's commitment. Also, DBSA has also offered to pay for the operational cost for the first 5 years. They will pay 50%, and National Treasury will pay the other 50%. So the fund is operational now. The second question around the contractor here at Parliament, and I have engaged with the Honourable Member of the EFF before. What we found is there's an existing contractor here, and this existing contractor has subcontracted to another subcontractor and has now broken ranks with that subcontractor. She knows that since last year December, they also wanted to send the workers off with nothing. We made an intervention, I was able to stop it, and the workers continue to work for another year. Now I'm informed again that the main contractor has broken ranks with the subcontractor, and again, we are now saying to Public Works, the workers have been here at Parliament for more than 10, 15 years. Let us see what we can do in consultation with Parliament to insource the workers. So that process is ongoing, because I don't want to see mostly women who are working and cleaning the building here, 120 Plain Street. I don't want to see them on the street. So we are working on that to save those jobs, and I will give the Honourable Member a report early next year. Thank you.
The next supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Sheikh Imam.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Minister, you spent 25 minutes yesterday plus 3 minutes of injury time, but did not convince us as to how this plan is really going to be implemented, creating hundreds of thousands of jobs. Now, this department particularly has been underperforming for years, long before you even came to this department. That's the first thing. 1.88 billion last year alone. It does not have the necessary capacity. Now, very importantly, you say to us that there's 20 experts, if that's the term you use, will be seconded from the private sector. Could you tell us who exactly these people are? What is the implication and the cost implications in terms of this? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chair.
The Honourable Minister.
Yes, my mic is on. Can I proceed, Chairperson?
Please proceed, Minister.
Oh, thank you very much. First of all, the capacity that you were speaking about within the department. Now, the capacity, I will agree and accept that the capacity in the Department of Public Works is, we do need some assistance there, and we do need to rebuild the capacity. But the Department of Infrastructure was established in the 6th administration for the first time. And we had to then put this new department together with the accounting officer. And in the process, we established Infrastructure South Africa. And Infrastructure South Africa, together with the presidential infrastructure, the PICC technical task teams. We brought all of those skills together. And we had also received, I think it's between 25 and 40, I must be careful with numbers, that we have received from, that being seconded by the private sector. They are not being paid by DPWI or by government. They are on a needs basis. As and when we need a specialist that must come and advise us, we draw on those skills. And that is how we were able, since the end of May and even before May, the private sector assisted us to draw up this infrastructure plan that was adopted by Cabinet, and they're still assisting us for the next year until we can build the capacity within government. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Question number 545 has been asked by the Honourable M.J. Cuthbert to the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Honourable Cuthbert, for the question. The NLC is expected to account for monies that are approved, that they approve to beneficiaries after they have disbursed the monies. I am advised that the NLC disburses funds to potential beneficiaries after those beneficiaries complete and sign grant agreements, which is normally within 30 days of projects being approved by distributing agencies. In the Portfolio Committee meeting held on the 2nd of September that the Honourable Cuthbert refers to, the NLC reported on projects that were completed at the time, namely all the processes had been done, including the signing of the agreements, and I'm informed that those projects amounted to 32 million rand. The NLC is required to provide updates when additional projects are finalized. And I am now advised that this sum of 32 million rand has gone up to 43 million rand, and the NLC should now be held to account for the additional sums that have been disbursed. Thank you.
The first supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Cuthbert.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson. Honourable Minister, on the 23rd of June 2020, you informed Parliament that by the 17th of July 2020, the entire disbursement of the National Lotteries Commission COVID-19 Relief Fund would be completed. 7 months into this lockdown, this process has still not been completed. It seems that there was little regard for deserving NGOs who have failed to make ends meet or worse, have had to shut up shop. Furthermore, we called on yourself and the NLC to exclude organizations who had allegations leveled against them for the mismanagement of funds. Yet you decided to grant both the Cape Town Minstrel Carnival Association and the Hangwani Mulaudzi Foundation 100,000 rand each for food parcels. Minister, can you confirm that the list of COVID-19 Relief Fund beneficiaries supplied to the Portfolio Committee has not been redacted, and that if it's found to have been redacted, that you will take the appropriate action against the NLC and its board? I thank you.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much for the follow-up question. I'd like to just point out to Honourable Cuthbert, when you make an allegation that I have granted 100,000 rand to particular projects, you are misleading the House. Those are not decisions that are made by executive authorities. Those are decisions made by the NLC, and our job is to make sure that there are accountability systems in place. Honourable Cuthbert, you will know that when the reply was given to a parliamentary question previously, I had recorded the reply of the NLC of the period that they expect they would disburse those monies. The Portfolio Committee has an opportunity to hold the NLC to account. I too hold the NLC to account, and we are keeping a watchful eye on two issues. The one is to make sure that monies intended for communities are indeed disbursed, and secondly, that we take such steps as are necessary to ensure good governance in the institution, and that in fact there is proper accounting for the decisions of the NLC. Separately, I will be advising of the further steps that we have taken in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The next supplementary question is to be asked by the Honourable Buyani.
Chairperson, thank you very much. Minister, what are the steps have been taken to address the public concerns in terms of relating to governance and controls of monies that is administered by the National Lottery Commission? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honourable Mbuyani, for the question. Indeed, there's a number of steps that we've taken to address both governance issues as well accountability for monies. The first thing is when allegations surfaced of wrongdoing, potential wrongdoing in the NLC, and following an initial request to the board to do a forensic, I then instructed the department to do an independent forensic investigation into the disbursement of monies. That independent forensic investigation uncovered serious challenges. The department subsequently went to lay criminal charges against implicated individual. In addition to that, we supported the request that the President, in fact, institute a special investigation unit investigation into certain of the affairs of the NLC, and the Presidency has recently made that announcement. In addition to addressing issues of potential wrongdoing, we've also made it very clear to the NLC that it is accountable to Parliament, that it needs to make available to Parliament the list of beneficiaries of the NLC, that is public money ultimately, and our constitutional injunction is to transparent and open governance. And indeed, we have dealt with attempted court applications to stop this, and some of these are still proceeding, so I can't anticipate the result. But here you see a resolute set of actions by the executive to address public disquiet, to deal with allegations, to make sure that we uncover the facts, and based on the facts, let the law take its course. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The third supplementary question is to be asked by the Honourable C. Tim Simang.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Honourable Minister, the question is, A, whether the Minister has requested investigations into any board member receiving payments from the COVID-19 relief assistance funding that was issued by the NLC or any other state entity. If not, why so? If so, furnish details on the findings of this investigation. B, whether the Minister has received the tenures of NLC chairperson and quality assurance members who presided over the adjudication of the proactive funding program, which have been marred by widespread corruption, nepotism, and have driven the Commission into disrepute. If not, what is the Minister's position on this matter? If so, furnish details of the review. C, what intervention strategies will the Minister adopt to encourage Commission to allocate more funding towards infrastructure development projects in rural areas to assist in job creation and the wider distribution of the Commission's proactive funding program? If not, why so? If so, furnish details of these intervention plans. And finally, D,
Your time is now in.
House Chair, on a point of order.
To the
Point of order.
Portfolio Committee of Trade and Industry.
Point of order.
On 2 September 2020, the department
House Chairperson Frolick.
the 3 related investigations
House Chair Frolick.
into projects
House Chair
being
Frolick, point of
awarded
order.
to the now suspended COO and his friends.
Expired, honourable member. Honourable
Sorry.
Simang, the time has expired. Before I take the point of order, I wish to remind honourable members that a supplementary question according to the rules is restricted to one follow-up question and not multiple questions as the honourable member have done now. Why are you rising, honourable Mazzoni?
House Chair Frolick, just to agree with you completely and to inform the House that I counted 7 questions asked there. Thank you, House Chair.
Honourable Minister, you may take your pick as to which one you want to respond to, but you won't have enough time to respond to all of them. I've already made a ruling on this one.
Thank you very
Honourable
much.
Minister.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Let me perhaps then say, by way of a generic reply that I think answers the core question, and that is, in the NLC, there are 2 types of monies that are disbursed. The one are, you could call them prescribed, and the other is what is called proactive funding. The forensic investigation that we've requested focuses on proactive funding, which is where the public disquiet and concerns have been concentrated. And I can't anticipate, obviously, the outcome of the forensic. The preliminary report resulted in us laying criminal charges, but I have agreed to the extension of the scope of the report based on the work that has been done. So in answer to the question whether there is any attempt to deal with proactive funding and the concerns raised by the honourable member, the answer is yes, and the details is what I have given now and in response to Honourable Mbuyani's question put to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The last supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Sheikh Imam.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Minister, thank you very much for your responses. My concern, Minister, is why do we always act after the fact? Now, what are the shortcomings that, led to this levels of looting and corruption in your department under the National Lotteries Commission? Because is there insufficient internal audit processes that can rather prevent this? Because now, Minister, what needs to happen is we need to spend good money going to try and recover bad money. Okay, millions of rands is now going to be spent to bring these people to book. Why are we not able to anticipate this and put in measures to prevent these things, Minister? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honourable Sheikh Imam. First, I think an excellent point that you raised, which is how do we ensure that we don't only act when the horse has bolted? So it seems that over a long period there's been public disquiet, and the investigations are about past misdeeds. But something very important is how the governance structure of the NLC works, and I guess that the same goes for many other public entities. First, we appoint boards, and we expect boards to play the legal role of governance, because a department don't govern and manage the financial affairs of these entities that are set up through legislation. The department, of course, has to account ultimately for the funds that it directly controls, and the rest of the fund is transferred. So the first line of defense is the board. The second line of defense is the audit. And I'm going to be asking, I have asked the department, once the forensic investigations have been concluded, and based on their findings, what were the weaknesses in the system? And if there are significant weaknesses, why were these not picked up in the audit process, and what further changes need to be made? But so I agree that I think our fundamental challenge as a democracy, as we build a capable state, as we fight corruption, is to put in place the kind of measures that reduces or avoids the opportunities for people to improperly get their hands on public funding. But there's one other issue, and it's called consequence management. If people get away with wrongdoing, and in this case, of course, there's an investigation, so I can't anticipate the outcome, but if people get away with wrongdoing without the law enforcement process kicking in, without people being held accountable in court, without the prospect of going to jail when they've done wrong and they have squandered public funding to private pockets, unless we can kick that in, we're not going to be able to deal with corruption. So therefore, an important part of this investigation has also been evidence that's uncovered is handed to the law enforcement agencies, to the Hawks, and they then have to kick in with their part of the work. So in summary, good question. And as you can see, we're now dealing not only with the symptoms of the problem, but how did the problem arise and how can we address and fix that? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Honourable members, we will now proceed to question number 503 that is asked by the Honourable Mawatwe to the Minister of Public Enterprises. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson. The answer is yes. According to the information that I've received from Transnet, the circumstances in respect of the donation to the amount of 350,000 rands made by MNS attorneys to Popo Molefe Foundation Charitable Trust are as follows. Has also provided in response to Parliamentary Question 1890 of the 4th of August 2020 to Ms. Mkalipi. The payment was not irregular as there was no direct or indirect benefit to either Dr. Molefe or any of his family members arising from the funds donated to the charitable trust. The board of Transnet has been fully briefed on the matter. The allegations of bribery and kickbacks as published, alleged kickbacks, as published in the City Press on the 5th of January 2020, were found to be malicious and defamatory. On the 29th of June 2020, the Press Council rejected the City Press allegations of bribery and kickbacks and directed City Press to publish an apology to MNS and Mr. Ndlovu. And I quote from the Press Council, the Press Council handled its ruling on 29th of June 2020 with Acting Assistant Press Ombudsman Johan Retief declaring, and I quote, I believe the reportage did not exercise proper care and consideration involving the reputation of MNS and by implication Mr. Ndlovu. And I go on, City Press has been directed to publish an apology to MNS and Mr. Ndlovu for unjustifiably reflecting in its reportage, both in the headlines and in the text of the article, that MNS has been implicated in kickbacks, alleged acts of corruption and bribery, and unnecessarily tarnishing their reputation. The editor of City Press has been directed to publish the apology at the top of the front page where the January article appeared, with a headline containing the words apology or apologizes and MNS and Ndlovu. The newspaper has also been ordered to apologize online. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The first supplementary question will go to the Honourable Mawatwe. The Honourable Mawatwe.
Thank you very much, Chair. We're not talking about City Press here, Minister. We're talking about the chairperson of the board in the name of Popo Molefe. Now you'll agree with me that Popo Molefe and Popo Molefe Foundation cannot be separated. It is the foundation that asked MNS attorneys for donation, while Popo Molefe himself was the chairperson of Transnet board. And if you look at the Transnet Code of Ethics, which intends to affirm transparent conduct and practices of both employees and non-executive directors, it says, I'm going to put your attention to section 11.2.2. It states that non-executive directors must refrain from using a position of authority and or facilities provided by Transnet to further personal interests or that of friends and relatives. And section 11.3.1, Minister, states that non-executive directors should not allow personal interest to influence business decisions or tasks and should disclose any actual or potential conflict of interest. Now, Mr. Gordon, how is it that the 350 donation to Bob Molefe and his foundation is not a personal interest and a potential conflict of interest? Is conflict of interest only reserved for certain people that are not close to you? If not, why is Mr. Molefe still a chairperson of the board of Transnet? I thank you, Chair.
The Honourable Minister.
Chair, in my response, I've indicated very clearly that the donation was made to a foundation. The foundation provides bursaries for students who are in need. Secondly, there is no personal benefit derived, I'm being told. I didn't go and investigate the matter. The board of Transnet assures me that there was no personal interest involved. And in that instance, there is no conflict of interest. But I take the point that we should take a more careful look at the code of ethics of boards of SOEs and perhaps craft more clearly these codes of ethics so that there can be no misunderstanding about what can be done and can't be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The second supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Malinga.
Thank you, Honourable House Chairperson. Honourable Minister, what is the policy regarding donations by the corporate sector and SOEs to alleviate the plight of disadvantaged or the disenfranchised South Africans, as this will prevent malicious and unfounded accusations? Thank you, Chair.
The Honourable Minister.
Chairperson, I think what we demand of anybody who's holding a position on an SOE or indeed in any public office is that there be complete transparency about what the source of any money is, which route the money arrived by in a particular account or institution, and thirdly, how that money was utilized and whether it was for a social purpose or not. So whether it is from the corporate sector or the SOE providing assistance to anyone in a financial sense, the same principle should actually apply. SOEs, unfortunately, over a period of time, have developed, for example, there's a Transnet Foundation, and the Transnet Foundation sponsors a train which provides health facilities to people, particularly in rural areas, and during the COVID pandemic played an extremely important role, together with the Solidarity Fund, in moving to different parts of the country, Eastern Cape, Northwest, and I believe Limpopo and other provinces as well, in testing local populations and people in rural areas for COVID-19. As far as, so they also, as you know, in the past have sponsored all sorts of events, which they no longer do. And we will take a closer look at some of these foundations and what are called CSI funds in order to ensure that they are purposed in the right way. But also, if SOEs are confronted with their own financial challenges, then some of these activities might have to be curtailed. But there are very useful other examples as well, where disused computers, for example, are provided to schools in poor areas, and students are beneficiaries of these donations as well. So I think that kind of generosity and solidarity and empathy in the South African context is very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The third supplementary question is to be asked by the Honourable Kachalia.
House Chair, it's Honourable Mazzoni. I'll be doing it. Thank you. Minister Gordon.
Please proceed.
Thank you very much. Minister Gordon, well, this is a case where we've seen that it was, you know, a case perhaps of mistaken identity or, you know, just, you know, blown up and whatever the case may be. It cannot be denied that there are numerous companies, law firms, consultancies that were used and were complicit in state capture and ensuring that the parasites that fed off the beast were able to do so. And I know you don't like being reminded of the time that you and I fought on the same team, but I will remind you of how many times we sat together in committee and heard about law firms and consultancies that had played a role in state capture. Minister, can we have your assurance that the Department of Public Enterprises has put together a list of all the firms and consultancies that were used during the time of state capture to enable those who chose to eat pieces of our state bit by bit, and that they are referred to their relevant societies and associations, but most importantly, that the South African government and certainly the Department of Public Enterprises no longer make use of their services?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson. As the Honourable Member taught me earlier on, Matzone, and she must pronounce it, so I keep remembering how to pronounce it. I'm very proud of the time we spent together. I'm glad you continuously remember it as well, because I think all parties at that time were united in their opposition to state capture. And certainly we continue that work from a different vantage point in the department at the moment against tremendous odds. You are absolutely right that those firms that have been complicit in the state capture process, and all of this is unfolding before the Zondo Commission at the moment, should be marginalized. They should actually pay reparations for people who suffered in terms of their careers and their well-being as a result of their malfeasance. Or allegations that they falsely made against individuals with absolute integrity during that particular time. And as you know, lots of good people were kicked out, stroke dismissed, stroke forced out of state institutions at that time. The legacy of state capture, of course, is one that is deeply embedded, both in cultural terms and ethical terms on the one hand, but also in the kind of impact that it had on the operations of SOEs. And we will continue in the course of our work to repair that damage on the one hand and reintroduce the right work ethic, but also the right ethical conduct amongst the staff. And that becomes the prime responsibility of the boards and the management teams that we put together in these institutions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The last supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable M. Schlengwa.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chairperson. Honourable Minister, just on that note of state capture, obviously, at the very heart of it was to undermine financial management. Transnet reported 10 billion rands worth of irregular expenditure in the last financial year. This indicates that the entity has a long road to recovery ahead, particularly with the unbaiting allegations of corruption and state capture. Misconduct uncovered in the year through March dates back as far as 2011 and take Transnet's wasteful expenditure and corrupt expenditure to 114 billion rand. So with that background, Minister, what is actually being done now with Transnet to turn things around insofar as investigations, consequence management and recoveries, but of course to deal with the financial mismanagement which has characterized this entity, tending it towards other failing and failed SOEs?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thanks to Honourable Schlengwa. He's absolutely right in his description of the consequences of state capture. The area of irregular expenditure, though, is a slightly more complex area, as he knows from his experience in Scopa. So there is, on the one hand, the discovery process in terms of irregular expenditure, and where transactions go back to 2011, sometimes they're difficult to actually find, and tens of thousands of documents or tenders and procurement contracts have to be examined in order to discover whether they were irregular or not. Secondly, if there is, let's say, an acceptable irregularity in terms of the process, there's a process by which the Treasury condones irregular expenditure. And so of that amount that he's mentioned, a significant part of that is waiting in the queue, so to speak, for the National Treasury to condone those amounts. And thirdly, the process of discovery will certainly go on. As far as consequence management is concerned, the trend, Chairperson, in many of the bigger SOEs and elsewhere is that as soon as the individuals who are guilty of this malfeasance are discovered, and they know that they are in the process of facing consequences for their crimes and deeds over a period of time, they resign. And then it's up to the law enforcement agencies to take the necessary actions. I think in the case of Eskom, you see some very good examples of civil claims being launched. In the case of Transnet, there's similar claims against firms like Trillion to recover money. McKinsey has paid back certain amounts of money as well in both those instances. And greater use now needs to be made of the SIU tribunal in order to freeze assets, seize assets, or recover the funds that are actually required. So this is ongoing work, and most of these boards and management teams are approaching this with a great deal of urgency. But the last point I want to make, Chairperson, is that those who started this process, those who embedded these processes, those who occupied ministerial and other positions which facilitated these processes still walk around as if nothing happened. And they need to be also held to account. Some of that is happening through the commission chaired by the Deputy Chief Justice, and hopefully those individuals will face the consequences of their deeds as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Honourable members, we will now proceed to question number 535. This question has been asked by the Honourable Gomba to the Minister of Tourism. The Minister will be responding through the virtual platform. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, House Chair. And thank you, Honourable Gomba. Statistics of the number of people who are responding to our campaign is still being collected, and therefore it is difficult to quantify the level of response that we have been able to see thus far. And anecdotally, evidence from various provinces so far indicates that since the opening of domestic tourism in June, most accommodation establishments, especially around bush, safari and outdoor offerings, experience high volume of visitors. Overall indications are that South Africans have overwhelmingly responded to our campaign. Our tangible example of this was when the South African National Parks website crashed due to unprecedented demand, and therefore out of this we are able to see number of people coming through. But again, when we move to risk level 1 under risk adjusted strategy in September, we deliberately opted to showcase a variety of tourism offering in small towns and rural areas. We moved across the provinces, myself and the DM, in order to showcase what we are doing and what are the offerings that we have in provinces. This is in line with this year's theme in terms of tourism and rural development. And our domestic tourism awareness campaign has been fostered in the local communities, especially within less visited rural areas of each province. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The first supplementary question is to be asked by the Honourable Gomba. The Honourable Gomba.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Minister, for the department to ensure that women are also benefiting in the tourism economy, how many provincial chapters of women in tourism were launched in South Africa through the assistance of your department? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, House Chair. The Women in Tourism program started in 2013. Maybe let me just give that. So the work has been done over time. We have been able to launch in all the provinces, despite the fact that we have one province currently that has challenges. And this for us is mainly around supporting of women in terms of tourism. But this is not the only facility that we are able to support women in ensuring that their enterprises rises and to be in the same level. We do provide incubation. We have a project that we have partnered with UNWTO, which is focusing women in rural areas. Specifically, we selected in Limpopo, where we are piloting with UNWTO in supporting women in the rural areas. We have also what we call incubators for women in 5 areas, where we are supporting women as well in terms of those. And we'll continue to do that both in terms of training, capacitation, and also supporting them in terms of market access, where we have set aside for market access, specifically for women in tourism. Thank you very much, Chair.
Switch off your microphone. The second supplementary question will be asked by the Honorable Gumbi. Honorable Gumbi.
Chairperson, it's Honourable Malim here. I'll take the question on behalf of Honourable Gumbi.
Please do so.
Minister, given that it looks more and more likely that we are going to be dependent on local tourism for the majority of the hospitality industry income for the foreseeable future, my question to you is this. What are you going to do to incentivize and assist the local hospitality industry, the tourism industry, the restaurant industry, and the like to recover from the COVID crisis? And what practical steps are you taking to ensure the health and safety of travellers, visitors, and people staying in hotels? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Mailem. In terms of our work in support of the tourism sector, one of the things that we have done tangibly is to be able to firstly showcase the safety in terms of our protocol to give comfort to the travellers. What we did, I led from the front as a minister by visiting establishment, showcasing the health protocols that we've put in place so that travellers can feel comfortable that they can leave their homes and they will go into an establishment and they will be safe and they will not be compromised. This has led to a number of people being able to leave their houses. As we go across the country, province by province, showcasing, as I said earlier on, we get feedback from the establishment and product owners that they've seen a number of people visiting them. The second area in terms of support, you note that, Honourable Member, in terms of financial support, we do not have the financial capacity as the department, as you have seen when the minister presented his MTBPS, Minister of Finance. As the department, what we have opted for is to be able to take journalists, take media across the country to be able to showcase the products. What we are learning is that most of us as South Africans, we have not known of various products that exist in our country. We thought that a lot of things offered are abroad, and therefore some people would have opted to travel abroad rather than being in the country. So as a tangible means, we have showcased South Africa in our theme to say we are reintroducing South Africans to South Africa so that they can know that they can enjoy. And as part of that, we have said to South Africans, share your experiences, give us feedback so that we can improve. And with that campaign, as I'm saying, Honourable Member, we are seeing quite a huge improvement. We are receiving feedback, and we are looking forward to formal statistics that can confirm the work. We do believe, as you are saying, that domestic tourism is going to be the pillar in the near future for this tourism sector to survive. And that's why we've urged product owners to redesign their products to cater for domestic market and lesser to international, while we are waiting for international tourism to come to fully into its operation. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The third supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Sitole.
Asibonge sinalo sibonge impendulo zikaNgqongqoshe. Mhlawumbe uNgqongqoshe nje siyazi ukuthi i-Department of Tourism yona eshayeke kakhulu kunawo wonke ama-department, ikakhulukazi abantu bakithi abahluphekileyo, abasemakhaya, abasemalokishini kanye nabase-small towns. Manje engizama ukubheka ukuthi ayikho indlela ukuthi kube neqoqo lefundazwe elizokwazi ukubheka ukuthi yini le engakwazi ukwenziwa yilabo bantu abashayeke kakhulu bese belethe imiphumela kuwe ukwazi ukuthi uma usebenza nge-information well informed. Bengicela ukuthi uNgqongqoshe uma ngabe usinikeze i-information ukuthi bakhona yini uNgqongqoshe ngoba nokuqeqeshwa kwama-officials endaweni ezehlukene kufanele kubonakala ukuze kubonakala ukuthi i-department njengoba ishaye kangaka nje iyakwazi ukurecover kulesi simo esibhekene naso. Ngiyathokoza.
The Honourable Minister.
Angibonge kakhulu Honourable Sithole kulo mbuzo. Kakhulu siyavuma umnyango wakwa-tourism ukuhamba ukuthi ngempela i-sector yethu yona eshayeke kakhulu kunamaningi, and futhi ukubuyela kwe-sector kakhulu ukuthi iphinde isebenze kahle njengoba kuqaleni kuzothatha isikhashana. Yebo mpela masesibheka abantu banamabhizinisi basemalokishi kule sector yethu lokusubiza ukuthi abantu basemakhaya elukuthi kakhulu siyabona ukuthi abanye bebenganayo imali ukuthi bafana nalabo namakampani amakhulu ukuthi baba nelento esibiza ukuthi ama reserve of lokhu bakubekele eceleni ukuthi mhlambe ngelanga emvula inetha bayakwazi ukuthi bakusebenzise bavala isikhala esikhona. Lokhu sikwenzile njengoba besikhuluma sithi sikwazile ukuthi sithi sibaxhase sibasekele and nama province wonke o-MEC baye bazama nabo ukuthi mabakhiphe okuncanyana basekelele emaprovinsini wabo. Esikwenzayo manje singumnyango wakwa-tourism ukuthi senza i-database ezokwazi ukuthi sinikeze kakhulu ukuthi abaphi abahambayo ukuthi abasakwazi ukubuya kwi-sector yethu, iminyango yamabhizinisi wawo amashishini wabo sewayavalwa and yini futhi esingayenza. Lokho sizokwenza siphathisane futhi kakhulu nalabo abasemaprovinsini abaphathiswa abanye bamaprovinsi ngoba sisebenza through Minimec. Ngiyabonga Sihlalo.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The last supplementary question will be asked by a member of the EFF. I haven't been supplied with the name. The EFF.
Thank you, Chairperson. The name is Pewan Muteka. Minister, the tourism industry will not grow beyond the level we already know if there is no deliberate attempt to diversify the industry, not just in terms of transformation, but also in terms of expanding our tourist attractions, include things like heritage and cultural tourism. What infrastructural and institutional investment are you planning to make to utilize the rich cultural heritage we have to promote tourism?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair. Honourable Deka, indeed we agree that without inclusive tourism, tourism will not grow beyond where it is. That's why, for example, today I stand in support of the queer community, which is the LGBTQI community, and wishing them well in terms of their Feathers Awards tonight, as they embark, as part of them saying we stand and we need to be recognized and respected. And as part of our work in ensuring that we have an inclusive tourism, we will be working together with them in creating pink routes across the country. Secondly, in terms of major areas that Honourable Muteka is talking about in terms of our sector, we remain committed as the tourism sector and the department to ensure that we diversify our products. We are able to offer products to different categories of people, whether age, gender, and any in terms of whoever that wants to be able to. We do believe that South Africa, in terms of product offering, remains a diversified product offering. But what we believe, Honourable Deka, is that we will be able to grow the sector. Tourism sector remains one of the resilient sectors that has been able to stand in terms of FS time. What we have to do is focused campaigns, focused marketing, but also as we continue to urge South Africans to support tourism sector in terms of preserving jobs, preserving businesses. And we remain very humbled by the response by South Africans who have heeded the call, both by myself, but more by the President, who have been able to go out and support the sector. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Honourable members, we will now proceed to question number 529. This question has been asked by the Honourable Mpulwana to the Minister of Public Enterprises. I now recognise the Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson. Transnet is maximizing the potential of existing port of Durban in the medium term to create a regional Southern Africa container hub positioned to attract the larger vessels which can carry up to 15,000 TEUs, those are the containers in size. The benefit of attracting such vessels from a global trade perspective is that they reduce the unit cost of moving containers over long sea distances. Such a hub port would better position South Africa as a global trading nation, and initial estimates suggest that such a strategy could reduce deep sea shipping costs by up to 20%. Furthermore, a hub and spoke container shipping network in the region will provide a boost to inter-regional trade as it will contribute to lower prices for regional shipping. Transnet is positioning itself as a key agency in the global maritime network through investing in critical areas such as people, capacity, equipment, and domestic transport connectivity. For example, the Transnet National Ports Authority is ensuring that ports provide the required services to allow trade to continue at our ports during the pandemic, and played a crucial role in that regard. To ensure that the ports continue to play an integral role in the maritime community and in support of the South African economy, the focus, amongst others, will be on investing in a new generation of fleet of tugs, dredges, and port infrastructure to ensure that ports will be able to receive and service new generation vessels, improving port efficiencies to minimize vessel stay in port, engaging customers to provide port solutions that will increase supply chain competitiveness and will lower port costs, expanding vessel trade routes through the development of regional and transshipment hubs, improve intermodal connectivity to decongest traffic flows to and from ports, and unlock opportunities for the private sector investments at ports, which will be an attractive opportunity for the private sector to come into. The ports terminals of Transnet, through its 16 complementary terminals, has sufficient capacity to handle cargo from key sectors such as containers, automotive, bulk, and break bulk. This capacity is to be supported by state-of-the-art technology and equipment, digital systems, and a strong contingent of skilled personnel and operators. Connectivity with the hinterland is enabled by a connected network of railroad and inland terminals, and Ports Terminal has and continues to focus on logistics performance and transport facilitation measures that enhance maritime connectivity and reduce trade costs. In relation to the reconstruction and recovery plan, Transnet's strategic plans and activities are aligned with the plan, particularly in respect of infrastructure development, improving the country's trade flows, making an economic contribution through the lowering of the cost of doing business, and by ensuring efficiencies across the logistics value chain. And I'll elaborate on this as we go further into the question. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. I've been informed that the Honourable Magaka will take charge of the question in terms of Rule 137, Sub-Rule 10A. Honourable Magaka.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Minister, for your previous response. I would like to ask, what plans has Transnet made to improve Durban Port? And when will the infrastructure project commence, and be whether other modes of transport accessing the Durban Port for trade will also be strengthened in this process? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson. The Durban Port is a critical part of the shipping industry as far as South Africa is concerned, and the trade network that South Africa enjoys. So there are extensive plans to firstly expand the number of berths at the port, secondly in terms of the roads infrastructure around the port, thirdly in relation to the train and rail infrastructure so that less of the road is utilized to move containers around, fourthly in relation to the other facilities that the port has, where it looks after a whole petroleum sector at the Durban Port as well. These plans have been developed in coordination with the municipality, the province, and other stakeholders, particularly from the business sector. And many of those activities will begin shortly in order to improve the capacity, as I pointed out in my initial remarks, so that Durban Port will become the key hub, trading hub as far as South Africa is concerned, supported by the other 6 major ports that Transnet operates along the South African coastline. Furthermore, Durban Port will be supplemented by, let's call it, specialist facilities and a specialist orientation as far as the other ports are concerned. So, for example, iron ore exports through Saldanha, the kind of facilities we have at Richards Bay for coal, and there are explorations taking place in relation to liquid gas being brought into the country, and a location for that is being identified together with private sector players and the Minerals and Energy Department. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The second supplementary question is to be asked by the Honourable Hansinger.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you, Minister. Minister, in terms of economic development and maritime connectivity, and something we haven't heard a lot of lately, Operation Pakisa, till now we only have 5 ships under the South African flag. Fact is that 96% of all our exports are done by foreign ships with foreign flags. What are your plans to change this and to influence this direction, which for the past 30 years has only caused 5 ships to be registered on our maritime registrar? And do you regard the single transport regulator as an appropriate idea towards this objective?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Chair. The question that the Honourable Member raises is an important one. Some years ago, South Africa introduced, let's call it a tonnage tax, I think it was called at the time, in order to, and it was more of an incentive than a tax, in order to attract ships to register with the South African authorities. But I'm afraid the shipping industry has its own ways of doing things, and as you correctly point out, the majority of the ships are registered in 2 or 3 cities around the world. We will have to do a lot of talking to the shipping lines in order to get them to register some of their ships here. And as the Transnet management is settling down, I'm sure they will engage with that. But another form of engagement is going to be the fact that recognizing the fact that foreign ships are in fact controlled by a handful of shipping lines, and that these handful of shipping lines, I won't name them for now, have a huge influence in terms of which directions they flow in, which ports they visit, what kind of cargo they would carry to which particular port, and other factors. Ultimately, South Africa and Transnet will have to connect in one way or another with this network of shipping lines that are quite powerful in their own right. And equally powerful is a club of port operators, and there's only a handful of them as well, that have a very significant presence throughout the world in the key ports in the major economies of the world as well. In terms of the single transport regulator, I think it's an attractive idea to move into. There are too many fragmented regulators as we have them at the moment. And once that goes through, we'll have a better way of managing tariffs in the South African economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The third supplementary question will go to the Honourable Mawatwe.
Thank you very much, Chair. Now, Minister, you know that Transnet has, for the longest time, left critical and core operations to private companies, and they were left with crumbs, things to deal with issues on the periphery, small tasks. In majority of ports here in South Africa, Transnet does not do anything besides pushing cargo to the harbour instead of the core work of port, rail port operations. Is it not time for Transnet to take back core tasks and do them and not rely on private companies? And given that the EFF will nationalize the mines and beneficiate mineral resources here in South Africa when we take over, shouldn't Transnet invest in turning over ports to be ready to export finished goods instead of raw material to all over the world? I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Chair. It's government policy to beneficiate mineral exports as much as possible, so that we export value-added commodities rather than just the raw commodities. A question that Minister Patel raised, or rather answered and addressed a little earlier on. Whether the EFF would ever get into government is for the South African public to decide, because I hope that we will remain a democracy for many hundreds of years to come, and democratic processes will determine that. As far as the functions of Transnet is concerned, much of the dockside work is actually undertaken by Transnet. Many of the terminals are also managed by Transnet. and there are also private sector companies that have some control over terminals. I think the key issue for Transnet itself is to begin to change the work ethic within Transnet. Secondly, to ensure that ships don't remain in anchorage for too long. Thirdly, to ensure that the turnaround time for offloading and onloading ships is much shorter than it currently is. Fourthly, they understand fully that they have to benchmark themselves with ports, not only now in other continents, but across the African continent as well. 20 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, Durban had a unique monopoly, if you like, as far as African coastline is concerned. But today, many more ports have been invested in by foreign countries, by the private sector. There's one country that has invested over $1 billion in order to create a port in a West African country. So this mix between the private sector and the public sector is something that we need to look at differently so that we can get the right kind of partnerships, get the right kind of technology. And importantly, I think the future of Transnet and the shipping world is going to depend on digital technology. And it's in this regard that the digital technology will completely change the manner in which planning occurs, the manner in which workflow is actually managed, and that would play an important role in contributing to decreasing congestion, which is often the complaint by users of our ports. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The last supplementary question is to be asked by the Honourable Schlengwa.
Thank you very much, Honourable House Chairperson. Well, Minister, you sound very optimistic and confident about the outlook of Transnet and the many other SOEs. However, we are highly concerned about this optimism because in your speech for the budget vote for 2019-2020 on the 11th of July, you specifically held that one of the priorities is to develop a green paper for the SOE's bill, which would address governance, SOE mandates, funding models, as well as guidelines. And according to that speech, it was to be developed in 2019-2020 financial year. However, Minister, in your briefing to the Portfolio Committee on the 4th of November this year on the annual performance plan, it was noted that the target of developing the green paper on the SOE bill was not developed. Therefore, Minister, considering the urgency of the need for this framework, why has there been a delay in this regard? Because then that takes away the optimism which you have, which we all want to maybe share. And what is being done to actually address this fundamental issue on the viability and sustainability of SOEs to give credence to the optimism you've spoken about today?
The Honourable Minister.
Chairperson, there's three different issues that Honourable Schlengwa is raising. The first is the viability question. And I think in different forms over the past 2 years, we've addressed that question. That viability is going to be dependent in many of the bigger institutions on the extent to which we can decapture the captured SOEs, the extent to which we put in good governance, good operational management, and a different operational culture, change the financial burdens that some of them carry, but also change the way in which they are dependent upon the fiscus as well. And finally, to recognize that in each of the markets that these SOEs operate, some of the bigger ones, those markets are changing rapidly. Eskom being a classic example where the climate change issues, the emissions issues, and the potential that renewable energy is providing is recognized as well. So that's the viability point. The second point is optimistic. I'm certainly optimistic because I have to be, but also on the basis of results that we are obtaining, that the process of change and the process of stabilizing these institutions is well on its way. And at the same time, we must recognize that the damage to these institutions was huge, and never forget that, because the extent to which we can speed up these processes is dependent upon the extent to which they were damaged and the time required to actually repair them. The third question is in relation to the Green Paper and legislation. The circumstances have changed in the recent past. The President has, since the recent past, in the recent past, in fact last week, convened the Presidential SOE Council. There are new ideas around governance that are emerging both across the world and will emerge from this council as well. So drafting a green paper and the legislation based on it is not something that you can do in isolation of the phenomena that are unfolding around us. So once those consultation processes have been completed, hopefully early in the next year, we will certainly look at what kind of legislation is required and what form and content the green paper itself will have. So this is not a question of not performing. It certainly is a question that the circumstances have changed, and we have to take into account, Chairperson, the examples that are unfolding around the world, in Malaysia, in Singapore, in China, and in some of the European countries, about how SOEs are governed, managed, and how shareholder conduct is undertaken in those circumstances as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Honourable members, we will now proceed to question number 534, asked by the Honourable Suwela to the Minister of Small Business Development. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, House Chairperson. The Department of Small Business Development, together with its two entities, SEDA and CIFA, launched its online database, SMME SA, at the height of the pandemic to allow SMMEs to apply for support. The department, with the support of the EU, the European Union, continues to stabilize and upgrade this platform to increase the types of services available to SMMEs. The database currently interfaces with the BIS portal, making it easy for informal businesses to also register their businesses with CIPC, SARS, and URF. We're finalizing the interface directly now with SARS, URF, Central Supplier Database, SASA, and HANES to enable both compliance reporting by SMMEs and access to business opportunities, whilst we shall have ease of verifying citizenship of the SMMEs that we are supporting. Part of the work that we are doing with the EU is to interface the SMME SA to the EU trade platform to ensure that South African small businesses can directly have access to the EU market. And we are also working to interface the SMME SA with the International Trade Center as part of enabling South African SMMEs and small businesses in general to have access to global supply value chains. Locally, the Department of Small Business Development has agreed with major FMCG suppliers and retailers that we will be prioritizing SMMEs registered on the SMME SA, irrespective of whether they enter the program through the DSBD or the FMCG companies, for support to participate in the localization import replacement program that my colleague Minister Patel articulated earlier. And this we're implementing jointly with the FMCG companies. On the regional front, we have proposed, with the full support of our President, His Excellency, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, that when the Africa Free Continental Trade Agreement comes into operation, the Africa Medical Supplies Platform must be converted into a full Africa Supplies Platform, and the SMME SA will be ready to interface with it as part of extending our access to regional value chains for our SMMEs. In addition, we will soon interface the SMME SA to various online trading portals or trade portals, in particular those owned by SMMEs and startups, to enable platforms for marketing of goods and services and create value chain marketplaces within sectors and across varying platforms. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The first supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Suwela.
Thank you, Chair, House Chair. Thank you, Honourable Minister, for the response. Honourable Minister, I would like to make a follow-up question. How will the department further support informal businesses to be in the mainstream of the economy. Thank you.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, House Chairperson, and thank you, Honourable Sewela, for the question. The department has already started supporting small businesses, in particular informal businesses, to be part of the mainstream economy. One, we are supporting them to formalize, as I've indicated earlier, by allowing them to register and make it easy for them to register through the BIS portal, which is a platform offered by the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. But also on our part, you know our various programs to support informal businesses. The Popular Sponsorship Support Program, which we are in the first phase of it, and we are targeting to support at least the first 25,000 now. The target is to get them to become the convenience centers in the townships and rural areas. And therefore, the sponsorships of today, tomorrow must become the general dealers. The general dealers of tomorrow, they must become the mini wholesalers. Eventually, they must become the wholesalers, but they must be accounted for. Secondly, you will recall our support program for motor mechanics and panel beaters and auto spares and fitment centers. In that program, we are supporting also informal motor mechanics or unregistered to register, but also give them access to training so that they can be accredited with the Retail Motor Industry Organization, so that the cars that they service or they repair can be paid for by insurance companies. Of the 13,000 or over 13 million vehicles in South Africa, only 30% are insured, the rest are not insured. It means that if our motor mechanics, panel beaters, and auto fitment centers can be supported, they will be able to provide services to the 70% of vehicles that are in the country that are not under warranty or under insurance. And in addition, we have started engagements, fruitful so, with the Department of South African Police Service, where the Minister of Subs has offered that 50,000 of their fleet, and we're hoping the Minister of Transport, our colleague, will avail the government fleet. 50,000 of their total fleet of police will be serviced by small and young motor mechanics and panel beaters. And you are working to make sure that those motor mechanics and panel beaters across our provinces, across our districts, are accredited, they are trained, and they can qualify to be accredited by insurance bodies so that they can get money from the insurance body. In addition to our clothing, textile, and leather scheme.
Minister, your time is now expired. Thank you. The second supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Mbele.
Ngiyabonga Salo ngaphambili. Minister, the plans that you expanded on earlier about the partnerships and interfaces to be formed sounds noble and lofty, but the actual performance record of using technology in this portfolio during the lockdown was frankly a shabby and disappointing state of affairs for many, many SMEs. As we know, there were glitches with the SMME SA website, which took more than a month to resolve. Then there was the infamous multiple spam email debacle, which caused major confusion among applicants to the SMME Debt Relief Fund. And just last week, I received a report about process bottlenecks in the shop support scheme. So, Minister, given this background of the glitches and the gaps, how can small business owners trust, and what assurance can you give that the departments and the entities in the portfolio can effectively and efficiently leverage technology in future to provide that small business support and those services?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, House Chairperson, and thank you to Honourable Mbele for the question. As all of us know, when technology starts, there will be glitches, the issues that what is the effort that we make to make a turnaround. You'll recall that during the lockdown, none of us were expecting the country to go on lockdown. So the department and its agencies were not geared for technology, as majority of our people still do not even have access to technology. On our part, we needed to find mechanism as soon as possible when the lockdown was there and the relief measures were to be announced, to say, how will the small businesses be able to apply for those measures despite the challenges? That's why we launched and we fast-tracked the coming into being of the SMME SA, which was envisaged to be launched only in this quarter of the year. And the improvement, I'm glad that Honorable Mbele is also stating the fact that within a month we're able to resolve the challenges of stabilizing the system and all these other things. And that's why we talk about continuous improvement on the work, and that's why we are roping in other people who have access to turnaround times. But also, we have also started to work on a program, and we are launching 4 digital hubs in the country, in Free State, in Mpumalanga, in Northwest, and in Limpopo, as part of making sure that when there are challenges, but also SMMEs can go to those digital hubs for technology assistance, but as we continue to stabilize that. So the department is really working on it, and there's nothing, Rome was never built in one day. Even your Facebook, your Twitter, Zoom, also, I'm sure the members of this house will recall that at one point, the sitting of the house was also hacked, or one of the committee meetings was hacked on Zoom, because it was never perfect. So who are we to claim perfection? Technology and engineering on itself is work in progress, it's continuous improvement, and that's why we are there. So we are working on it, and we'll continue to deal with the challenges as they arise. Thank you.
The third supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Msimang.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, Honorable Minister. It is undeniable that COVID-19 had a tragic impact on the livelihood of small and medium-sized enterprises. The survey referred to in a recent report by Small Business Institute on the impact of COVID-19 showed that there could be 423,000 potential job losses in the small business segment alone. We need to be creative in assisting this sector. Considering the urgent need of policy certainty, what is the Department of Small Business Development doing to address policy uncertainty in relation to digital technology and access thereto for small businesses? I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, House Chair. Thank you, Honourable Msimang, for the question. We are not only relying on the report by the Small Business Institute, the department, together with the World Bank, we did our own survey, the first round, which was done in June, to tell us on the impact of the COVID-19 on small businesses, including those which are already supported by government and those who are not supported. So the statistics in terms of the impact are known to all of us. In addition, Stats SA has recently released a report that shows the recovery, or the green shoots of recovery, in the manufacturing sector, with a large contribution of small businesses, but also the contribution or the return rate of informal businesses, that they are coming back largely due to the impact of the informal business support programs that we have offered. I'm not sure that when the honourable member refers to policy uncertainty in terms of digital access, the government has a clear policy clarity in terms of access to technology and digital access, and that's why we are launching Spectrum through the Department of Telecommunications and Digital Technologies, and in that they've made provision for public access to one, which is also going to be available for small businesses. We are already working with the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies to make sure that the post offices become centers or digital hubs as they augment the digital hubs that the department is implementing. So in terms of the certainty of government policy on technology, there is clear certainty, and we also pushing and advocating for reduction of data. And if you recall that during the lockdown, the government, all the government websites, including the SMME SA that I referred to, they were zero rated to improve access to that technology. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The last supplementary question will go to the Honourable Swart.
Thank you, House Chair. Thank you, Minister. Minister, it's very encouraging to hear what has been done to assist small businesses, but we do still see many that are closing. Now, several SMEs have highlighted their struggle to connect with potential buyers. And very often, they are overly dependent on a small number of clients. And in some cases, an entire business can be concentrated in a single local distributor. Minister, you indicated the emergence of online marketplaces and micro sales platforms, which allows manufacturers to access new markets. But would businesses be able to access assistance from the department and possibly from the Business Growth Fund to enable them to go online, as you indicated, regionally and even with the EU, so that one can then largen your market so that we can create jobs and encourage those small businesses. Thank you, Minister.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, House Chairperson, and thank you for the question. Indeed, the work that we are doing is to make sure that we increase access to markets for our SMMEs, because without access to market, you can put money, you can put enterprise development support, but there will not be any business, because the money or profits are generated when people are able to sell their products and services. And in terms of the work that we are doing, and that's the work that we've partnered with the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies to make sure, how do we support SMMEs in the technology or digital economy to participate meaningfully? And in that space, that's why I've referred earlier to say we are going to be launching or availing an interface for SMMEs to go online, including those who have to go online. That's why we've advocated strongly, and we got the support of the minister, my colleague, Minister Ndabeni Abrahams, to make sure that our SMME SA gets rated. And that's why we're using it as a base platform. And that's why we're doing international linkages so that SMMEs can have a global reach in terms of their products. But we go further than that. We're not only supporting them to have online access, we're also supporting them to have access to market. Part of the localization and import replacement program that we're driving together with our colleagues in the DTIC is to make sure that we actively, as a department, support SMMEs to have access to market. We've done a call out, or we're going to go on a call out to make sure that at least for the first products and services that are listed as a first round for import replacement and localization, we'll request SMMEs to register so that we can find them where they are and support them. We have assigned our officials to be district champions so that we can be more accessible, so you don't have to deal with everybody in the department, irrespective of where you want your support. You'll deal with one person who deals with your district and will link you across the full value chain of the portfolio. That is the department, CEDA, and CIFA. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Honourable Members, the time allocated for questions has now expired, and outstanding replies received will be printed in Hansard. Before we proceed to the first order, I wish to make the following ruling. Honourable Members, on Wednesday, the 2nd of September 2020, during oral questions for Cluster 2 Social Services to the Minister of Human Settlements, Water and Sanitation, a point of order was raised by the Honourable Minister Sisulu regarding remarks made by the Honourable Ntlangwini. The Honourable Ntlangwini made the following remark while posing a supplementary question to the Minister, and I quote, "That little tantrum that you had thrown early on, an egocentric answer you have given, stop those tendencies of your entitlement behaviour," close quote. The Hansard audio recording confirmed that these remarks were indeed made. I had ruled at the time that the Honourable Ntlangwini should withdraw remarks, which she did, albeit with reluctance. The Honourable G.J. Lewis then rose on a point of order, challenging the ruling I made. Meanwhile, the Honourable Ntlangwini continued with her supplementary question. The Honourable Minister Zulu then stood on a point of order, alleging that the Honourable Ntlangwini had repeated the same statement that she had been asked to withdraw. Since I did not hear the alleged remarks being repeated, I undertook to study the answer and to return to the House with a considered ruling. Meanwhile, Minister Sisulu from the floor of the House had also pointed to the Honourable Lewis and stated the following, and I quote, "You represent the people that murdered our people. You a murderer. You represent the people that murdered our people," close quote. A point of order was then raised by the Honourable Malatsi asking for the remarks of the Minister to be withdrawn. The Honourable Ntlangwini interjected and again repeated the remarks about the Minister, at which point I ruled her out of order again and asked her that she be removed from the platform. Many other interjections then followed, all with complete disregard for the authority of myself as the presiding officer on the virtual platform and the Honourable Jantjie, sitting in the chair in the chamber. That being the case, I would like to remind members of the following rules in regard to conduct in the House. Rule 84 states that no member may use offensive, abusing, insulting, disrespectful, unbecoming, or unparliamentary words or language, nor offensive, unbecoming, and threatening gestures. Rule 85, sub-rule 1 states that no member may impute improper motives to any other member or cast personal reflections on a member's integrity or dignity or verbally abuse a member in any other way. Rule 92, sub-rule 11 states that a ruling of the presiding officer is final and binding and may not be challenged or questioned in the House. Rule 92, sub-rule 12 further explains that a member who is aggrieved by the ruling may write to the Speaker and request that the principle or subject matter of the ruling be referred to the Rules Committee. Accordingly, honourable members, I would like to rule as follows. Firstly, members should not challenge the ruling of a presiding officer in the House and thereby entice other members to be defiant of the ruling and cause disruption. I had already ordered at that point the Honourable Ntlangwini to be removed from the platform on that day for her repeated remarks, which I still regard as out of order. I would like to caution both the Honourable Ntlangwini and the Honourable Yield Lewis not to repeat their unruly conduct on challenging or defying the ruling of a presiding officer. Secondly, the remarks made by Minister Sisulu were also unacceptable and unparliamentary. They do not have a place in our discourse in this House. Honourable Minister, I request that you withdraw the remarks. The Honourable Minister. Is the Honourable Minister Sisulu on the platform?
Chairperson, a letter has been written to the Speaker withdrawing that the very day after the incident.
No, Honourable Minister,
there is a written withdrawal of that letter.
The instruction is that you must withdraw now. Can you withdraw now?
Honourable Shavambu, I'm dealing with that matter. I do not need your assistance. Honourable Minister, I'm requesting you to withdraw the remark here in the House now. Honourable Minister Sisulu.
I withdraw, and I withdraw the letter then as well. Thank you.
Honourable Minister. Honourable members, I will now request the Secretary to read the order of the day as I hand over to the Deputy Speaker, who will preside over the rest of proceedings. The Secretary will read the order.
Consideration of report of Standing Committee on Finance on 2020 revised and proposed fiscal framework.
I now request the Honourable Shwangwani to take the platform.
Thank you, Honourable Chair, Honourable members. Nakhensa mutshamaxitulu ku nyikiwa nkarhi wa ku nyika xiviko hi mpimanyeto lowu nga andlariwa hi Holobye wa swa Timali Kulukumba Tito Mboweni. Inko. The Minister of Finance, Honourable Tito Mboweni, tabled the 2020 revised fiscal framework and the proposed 2021 medium-term framework in line with the relevant provisions of the Money Bills Amendment Procedure and the Related Matters Act. The Minister further briefed the Committees of Finance and Appropriations of the NA and NCOP, respectively. The committee received an analysis and submissions on the revised and proposed frameworks from the PBO and FFC. On the 4th of November, the committee received both oral and written submissions from the public. The MTPPS is tabled shortly after government had adopted a supplementary budget to respond to COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic has exacerbated existing structural and fiscal fragilities. On the social front, it has amplified the existing inequalities and pushed many people into poverty and unemployment. The South African economic outlook has deteriorated further since the tabling of the special adjustment budget in July 2020. Real GDP is now expected to contract by 7.8%. According to National Treasury, the sharp downturn in the domestic economy follows a long period of economic stagnation, while COVID-19 and measures taken to protect public health resulted in steep decline in consumption, investment, and exports. The economy is expected to recover to a real GDP growth rate of 3.3% in 2021. Rapid and effective implementation of the economic reconstruction and recovery plan as tabled by the President is expected to drive economic growth over the medium term. This plan was agreed upon by the social partners, and it targets short and long-term structural reforms to boost growth and remove constraints to investment and employment. Observations. The committee recommends that this report be read with its observations and recommendations in its special adjustment budget and the 2020 fiscal framework reports where relevant. The committee notes that although Stats SA reflect that the unemployment rate had decreased from 29% to 23%, there are actually more people, that is 5.2 million of working age, who are currently inactive, as about 2.2 million people lost their jobs and many businesses shut down during COVID-19 lockdown. Revenue collection has declined, and one of the causes is the digitalization of business. Digitalization has pros and cons. Digitalization of business activities and continued base erosion is affecting tax revenue sources. We note that budget deficit and debt has increased. 24 cents of every R1 collected in revenue went to debt repayment, compared with 16 cents in 2019-2020. Higher debt levels, revenue decline, and higher borrowing costs result in debt service costs consuming a larger share of revenue over the MTEF. We note that consumption spending, that is spending on health, education, water, and sanitation, will decrease. Spending on these programs is the core mandate of government. Basic education will not increase in the 2021-22 financial year. These will have implications for delivery of basic education. The peace and security function will decrease by 2.8%. Defense and state security is set to decrease by 9.3%, and home affairs by 13.4% reduction. The social development function will decrease by 1% in the 2021-22. More specifically, the social security funds will decrease by 4.9%. We further note the economic reconstruction and recovery plan could be hampered by a fiscal policy framework focused on fiscal consolidation and debt reduction challenges. SCOF notes the non-implementation of the third year of the 2018 wage agreement, which has been challenged by public sector unions, thus casting uncertainty on the implementation of increasing the wage bill. The committee notes the amount of 10.5 billion allocated to SAA for business rescue purposes. To this effect, 569 million rand from local government will be made available for SAA. Recommendations. The committee recommends the socio-economic impact of the implementation of tax relief measures should be monitored, particularly to ensure that SMEs and informal sector do benefit. On the wage bill, the committee calls upon National Treasury and the Department of Public Service and Administration to follow due process in negotiating the proposed cuts with unions. The committee makes this recommendation taking into account the COVID-19 economic circumstances that are having serious impact on the budget. On SAA, the committee will confer with the Standing Committee on Appropriations, Portfolio Committee on Public Enterprises, National Treasury, and DPE to get the details of how the 10.5 billion will be used. The committee recommends the fast-tracking of the establishment of the proposed Presidential State-Owned Enterprises Council, whose task will be to provide strategic direction and oversight of state-owned companies. There will be an engagement on the feasibility of unlocking of prescribed assets for development purposes. National Treasury should consider how pension fund members can leverage their retirement fund assets to improve their personal financial circumstances. The South African government should work with the OECD and the African Tax Administration Forum on the digital tax framework. The MTBPS is silent on how the district development model will be resourced. It is important that government provides clarity on its operational modalities and provides the initiative with the necessary resources. Lastly, government should address economic barriers by adopting a localization policy, that is, localized product value chain approach. I move for the adoption of the report, Deputy Speaker and the Chairperson, Nakensa Inko.
Honorable Joseph of the DA. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'm the constituency head for Brackenfell, and I wish to pause a few moments on what's happening in that constituency. Honourable Speaker, I support the call by the Premier of the Western Cape and the Minister of Education in the Western Cape and all stakeholders who have called for the rights of students to be protected while they're writing exams. I also appreciate the statement by the President to call for calmness. Any mass meeting, any mass gatherings at the school at this time is not helpful. The police is there to take responsibility to deal with the unrest. Dit is verstaanbaar dat ouers en die gemeenskap bekommerd is oor hulle kinders se veiligheid en die aanhoudende intimidasie taktiek wat gebeur kan nie langer deur wetsgehoorsame burgers geduld word nie. Aan al die ondersteuners reg oor Suid-Afrika wil ek sê die DA se standpunt is die Weskaap is deel van Suid-Afrika en is nie deel van 'n onafhanklike staat nie. Ons ondersteun dit nie. Back to my speech. Let us remind ourselves that a medium-term budget policy statement gives momentum to the government. It gives the opportunity to prioritize the budget. Changes to spending are out of proportion if we compare it with the revenue collection. In terms of the Money Bills and Related Matters Act 2009, the revised fiscal framework should ensure that cost of current spending is not deferred to future generations. South Africa is now faced with this reality. The COVID-19 pandemic, with its devastating health and economic effects in our country, will be felt by future generations to come. The state capture experience under ANC government, like the Marikana experience, should be recorded as the biggest embarrassment in our democracy. Honourable members, it is my hope that the members elected in the 6th Parliament, as well as all departments, state-owned entities, will cooperate with the Zondo Commission. We need to close the state capture chapter, ensuring that we do not deny future generations with best opportunities. When the Minister of Finance tabled the revised fiscal framework, we all know South Africa was in trouble. We all agree that the future on the government wage bill needs urgent attention. Health, education, local government need urgent attention. We agree to build a capable state that must provide a professional service. The global economic outlook is bleak and impacts on our own projected growth. We do agree on that. We agree on the structuring of Eskom with alternative energy options. We agree that our debt is unsustainable. We agree to form partnerships with the private sector. We agree on the restructuring of state-owned entities. We agree that the public procurement bill must be amended to deal with undue influence and corruption. The Democratic Alliance agree with structural reforms, such as modernizing network, industries, and increase in the regional economy and trade. That we as the Democratic Alliance do not agree with is the bailing out of SAA, the 10.5 billion rand under the name of Business Rescue Plan. We do not agree that money is shifted from line departments, from police, from higher education, from health. Money must be shifted to the poor that cannot afford or don't fly aeroplanes. The poor need government to invest in restoring human dignity. The Democratic Alliance do not agree with raising of personal taxes. Economic growth and job creation is the best way to increase taxes. The Democratic Alliance do not agree that the economy must suffer any longer under COVID-19 unreasonable lockdown regulations. We do not agree that lockdown power must remain with Cabinet. The power must shift to Parliament. The power must shift back to the people of South Africa. The airlines across the world are changing and business models are changing as well. One of the best airlines in the world, British Airways, is cutting down on senior management salaries and reducing its assets. And according to the report in the Business Day written by Julie Johnson, Boeing decided that organizational restructuring is unavoidable if it wants to stem the cash flow and mitigate the risk. Why is the ANC choosing SAA over millions of people who live in poverty? The uncertainty of SAA must come to an end. The uncertainty of SAA staff must end immediately. Millions of people in our countries waiting for houses, for water, sanitation, electricity, clinics, sports facilities, ECD centers, police station, and law enforcement agencies for safer communities while government is wasting money on SAA. While the Mail and Guardian recorded and with millions of people, and it's recorded correctly, the question was asked before the medium-term budget policy statement, how did we get into this mess? We as members of Parliament must ask the question now, how do we get out of this mess? What decisions are we taking in Parliament to get out of this financial mess? While the ANC members is still in denial that our country are facing a mess, and because of state capture, the majority of members in the 6th Parliament want South Africa to succeed. The governing party must show political will to get South Africa out of this mess. And let me as a DA offer some solutions and suggestions how to get out of this mess. Open up the economy with the necessary health protocols. Follow the President's advice. Get rid of corrupt colleagues and officials. Expose corruption in the private sector. Introduce value for money procurement projects. Implement consequence management. Introduce no salary increases for people earning over $1 million per annum. Implement the rural safety plan. Food security is non-negotiable. Ensure that municipalities spend their money on maintenance and aging infrastructure and deal with the water leaks projects. Move faster on waste management and river pollution projects. Fix the Vaal River catchment system, in particular raw sewage that's flowing into the Vaal River, as it has serious health implications as well as ecological and agricultural challenges. The Finance Committee and the Appropriations Committee in both houses must do the recommendations to Parliament in terms of their mandate and in terms of the interest of the poor. I want to quote what Mr. Reiter of Eskom said. There is an opportunity to do better things, but it will take a lot of effort. The effort that he's referring to is political effort. Effort from Parliament, effort from municipalities to prepare for less income while government is pursuing alternative energy models. Electricity is not affordable to the poor anymore. We need political effort away from load shedding and stop the NERSA Eskom legal squabbles that keep the tariffs down. Honourable Deputy Speaker, it is a big mistake if government don't listen to the professional institutions in government. The Fiscal Commission and the Parliament Budget Office and many other institutions, organizations in our country keep on reminding us that shifting money to SAA is at the expense of South Africans. This is equal to the apartheid government where the minority benefit at the expense of the majority, meaning the ANC is out of touch with the reality. Honourable members, revised fiscal framework is another opportunity by Parliament to bring hope to South Africans. I thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Sivambo.
Thank you, Deputy.
He's going to speak on our behalf.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, Honorable Mountain.
Okay, thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, the EFF votes against the report on Standing Committee of Finance on 2020 revised and proposed fiscal framework. When Statistics South Africa released its gross domestic numbers for the second quarter of 2020, it illustrated that the economy has contracted by 51%. Part of this contraction was a contraction in the construction sector, which shrunk by 76.6%. Manufacturing shrunk by 74.9%, mining by 73.1%, transport and communication by 7.9%, trade by 67.6%, personal services by 32.5%, electricity and gas by 36.4%, finance by 28.9%, and government's contribution to the GDP shrunk by just under 1%. The only sector of the economy that grew is agriculture, which expanded by 15.1%. Of course, the lockdown regulations contributed significantly to a shrinking economic activity and therefore shrinking of the base upon which the state should collect revenue to meet its obligations. As a response, government announced what it misnamed a stimulus package, which was nothing but a public relations exercise aimed at misleading the people of South Africa into believing that 10% of the GDP to revive economic activity. The illusionary 500 billion rands, Deputy Speaker, is a dismal failure and will not contribute to the growth of the economy because less than 10% of the 200 billions set aside as loan guarantee was used. The billions of rands shifted from equally important functions of the state was wasted in the poorly planned purchase of PPEs and other related healthcare services, such as the establishment of temporary hospitals, which evidently were not needed, for example, in Gauteng. Now, the essence of the midterm budget policy statement was to announce government's unscientific intention to shift a significant component of the budget from what they call consumer services to capital expenditure. What this means is that the equitable share distributed to different spheres of government will be compromised in favor of conditional grants, which the poorest municipalities and communities will not benefit from due to incapacity and directionlessness. There's no scientific and believable case that shifting of the budget will lead to growth, and even if this were to happen, the quality of growth will not have a qualitative and quantitative impact on poverty. Important sectors of service delivery, including education, will be negatively impacted, and there still will not be growth. Chairperson, Deputy Speaker, the reduction of government expenditure on whatever area of its commitments will only serve to shrink the economy and will not reduce the debt to GDP ratio. A shrinking government expenditure will lead to a shrinking economy and thereby expand the debt to GDP ratio. The solution is to expand both the quality and quantity of South African domestic economic activity. The reason South Africa is not realizing growth is because government continues to mismatch its fiscal and procurement policies to the long overdue need to build local industrial capacity. When they made their submission to the MTBPF, the Fiscal and Financial Commission said the Ministers of Finance, of Economic Development and Trade and Industry, of Labour should jointly address the economic barriers, social inequality and societal polarization by adopting a localized product value chain approach. The FFC further said, I quote, the expression of this approach should be found in the incentive grants frameworks of both provincial and local conditional grants as hard conditions to permit procurement of goods only if they are made or assembled locally within the South African borders, to stimulate the domestic economy and encourage job growth while taking international trade agreements into account. While there are non-binding regulations on localization, these are not impactful. South Africa needs to elevate the localization rhetoric into building procurement laws, meaning that the PFMA, MFMA, and all procurement laws of state-owned companies should be amended to achieve the localization commitments. In that regard, Deputy Speaker, we should question the philosophical underpinning of industrial policy in South Africa. We spend billions of rand subsidizing foreign industries, and in the immediate, utilize state procurement capacity and off-takes to sustain this industry. Deputy Speaker, more than 2 million people lost their jobs during the lockdown period, and there is nothing believable from this government that these jobs will ever be recovered. Deputy Speaker, in 2021, we're going to local government elections, and a significant number of municipalities are in serious debt, owing ESCOM for bulk electricity supplies and owing water boards for bulk water supplies. Our concrete and decisive submission as the EFF is that National Treasury should deduct the monies owed to ESCOM directly, water boards and other creditors before the local government elections, because we do not want to inherit debt-ridden municipalities, because it's a reality, Deputy Speaker, that EFF is going to take over municipalities come 2021. Thereafter, we need to have an open and frank discussion on the division of revenue principles, which currently allocate less than 10% of the overall budget to the local state. On South African Airways, Deputy Speaker, we demand that prior to the transfer of the 10.5 billion rands to the business rescue practitioners, they must appear in Parliament and first explain what they did to the previous budget allocations and clearly state what they plan to do with the new allocations. SAA cannot and must not be shut down. It must have a strategic equity partners, while the South African government retains a minimum of 60% of its ownership. A properly managed SAA will play an important role in promoting tourism into South Africa, but also in the regional and continental economic integration, which is what the African continent is pursuing. Overall, Deputy Speaker, we don't believe that the MTBPS present a sustainable policy direction to the South African economy, and we therefore reject the report. I thank you, Deputy
Speaker. Thank you. Honorable Buthelezi.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, I will be speaking on behalf of the Honorable E.M. Buthelezi.
Okay, go ahead, Ndati.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker. While the IFP understands the Minister of Finance attempts to sugarcoat the real state of our economy as he addressed Parliament delivering the medium-term budget policy statement, we can't but be made to believe that there are indeed green shoots and that there is growth on the horizon. Our country is in a dire situation and we require immediate action to be taken in order for us to get back to work. South Africans should not be told mixed messages. We cannot undermine the intelligence of our people. The Verox is dead. It is only because it has big leaves which allows it to survive in hard conditions long after it may have been ripped from its roots, much like the South African economy right now. The FP was surprised to see the minister carry the plant to the House this time round. The evils of corruption have ripped apart any good plans which have been set forth to be implemented. There is certainly no use for more plans when we need efficient, effective, and active implementation. We all want to live in a South Africa that is indeed alive with possibility, that is prosperous and successful, but our state cannot function if we are to be sold to the highest bidder when seeking more loans to cover the budget deficit. Deputy Speaker, the debt to GDP ratio in South Africa is plainly ridiculous. It is no laughing matter, though, when our sovereignty is in question and when national security may be compromised because of poor financial and economic management have become the order of the day. Our country would not find itself knee-deep in debt with debt to GDP ratio of almost 90% if we had adequately prepared during the past few years without the difficulties of COVID-19. We cannot and must not blame the coronavirus pandemic for this. The blame is on the past ANC government administrations, the 9 wasted years, and today we have to now bear the brutal brunt of those wasted years, and the buck stops with the Minister of Finance and the President. South Africans now know where the money will come from. to fund the miracle targets as set out by President Ramaphosa in his economic and reconstruction plan. It is unsustainable for us to continue going into debt. We are at risk of a debt trap. We are borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. Government increasing short-term loan borrowing, taking more long-term loans, and increasing taxes on the middle-income earners in our country is nothing short of disastrous. Continued bailouts to SAA and other state-owned entities is throwing our money down the pit. It is not un-African if we're to privatize these entities. It would in fact be patriotic. In fact, we can be reaping the financial rewards of SOEs if they were actually privatized. We cannot continue to throw money at non-financial restructuring plans and shuffling around weak boards at our SOEs. Deputy Speaker, we welcome the MTBBS approach on agriculture. It is already growing, and we as the IFP have been calling for greater emphasis to be placed on this sector to ensure food security, subsistence farming, and local economic development. What our country and our people yearn for is to help themselves get out of poverty and the perpetual cycle of struggle and inequality and unemployment. As Prince Buthelezi has said in this House before, and I quote, our people do not want more handouts, they want a hand up. The principles of self-help and self-reliance must be emphasized, close quote. We all know that we do not have the money.
Close your remarks as well. Your time is expired, Honorable Member.
Let us get our country to work by empowering them for the long term. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Agbare Wessels.
Deputy Speaker, Member van Staden will be speaking on the party's behalf from Wales. May I continue?
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Ned.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Ons moet met mekaar eerlik wees. Suid-Afrika is in die moeilikheid. Die staatskas is leeg geplunder, die ekonomie is in 'n resessie, werkloosheid is 'n krisis en die behoefte aan dienste en maatskaplike bystand neem toe. Ons is oor die rand van die afgrond en in 'n donker tonnel met min vooruitsig vir lig aan die einde. Maar daar hoef nie veel uitgebrei te word oor hoekom die land homself in hierdie krisis bevind nie. Wat 'n besliste feit is dat die huidige fiskale en ekonomiese krisis nie as gevolg van COVID-19 pandemie is nie. Hierdie krisis het vererger, maar ons was reeds in hierdie gemors lank voor COVID-19 se aankoms in hierdie land. What is more important is how to get out of this crisis. A mind shift is desperately needed. Currently, social needs are increasing whilst the number of tax base is decreasing due to the direct economic circumstances. The solution to this problem will not be tax increases, but rather the opposite. The economy needs to be stimulated and the tax base needs to be increased. Rather than increases in individual and company taxes, the number of taxpayers and businesses contributing to the state's revenue should be increased by introducing tax relief and more incentives. Ever-increasing rates, taxes, and levies, while service delivery is inadequate in contributing to low investors' confidence and adversely affecting economic growth. Meer belastings en tariewe is nie die oplossing nie. Die bestuur van uitgawes en groei van die ekonomie om sodoende die inkomstestroom te verhoog is die oplossing. Die regering moet belasting verdien, nie slegs invorder nie. Daar moet dienste wees, daar moet waarde vir belastinggeld wat deur die staat bestee word wees. Die uitbuiting van die staat deur kontrakteurs en besighede omdat hulle deur kaders van die regerende party besit word moet stop. The liabilities of government should be addressed. One solution to mitigate the contingency liabilities is to do away with the road accident fund. We can learn from many other African countries in this regard, but rather make third-party insurance compulsory for all motor vehicle owners. By doing this, only the owner of a vehicle pays towards such insurance for third-party claim. Currently, the road accident fund is a burden on all South Africans, and due to the mismanagement and abuse of the fund, is a huge liability. Also, the claimants, the victims of road accidents, do not currently receive the compensation due to them. Beleidssekerheid is nodig om beleggings na Suid-Afrika te lok. Daar moet eens en vir altyd duidelikheid en sekerheid kom oor byvoorbeeld voorgeskrewe bates en gestop word met onverantwoordelike uitsprake wat beleggers afskryf. Die privaat sektor is nie die vyand nie. Die regering se geuite retoriek van sondebokpolitiek om hulle eie tekortkoming te verbloem, wat ook tot by die privaat sektor strek, is onaanvaarbaar. Die privaat sektor is die grootste werkskepper in die land. 'n land wat deur werkloosheidskrisis in die gesig gestaar word. Ons sit met 'n departement van arbeid wie se mandaat juis na werkskeping ook uitgebrei is, maar wat nie oor die middele en wil beskik om dit te doen nie. Deur die privaat sektor met voorskriftelike arbeidswetgewing en 'n stiefhouding tekortwiek, sal bloot die werkloosheidsprobleem en gevolglike sosio-ekonomiese probleme vererger. We need economic free zones where restrictive legislation and certain rates and taxes are completely suspended in order to draw investments and create employment in such special zones. Agbare voorsitter, maak dit nie sin dat daar geld weggeneem word by munisipale infrastruktuurtoekennings, waterinfrastruktuurtoekennings, onderwys, polisie en gesondheid om dit in die geval die lugrederye te gee nie. Hoeveel broodnodige belastingbetalersgeld gaan nou nog in hierdie swart gat van gefaalde staatsbeheerde entiteite gestort word voor hierdie ANC-regering sy les leer? Ideologie moenie bo die belange van die mense van Suid-Afrika geplaas word nie. Die mense van Suid-Afrika begin deur julle te sien en ons gaan julle by die stem bestraf. Dankie voorsitter.
Dankie. Honorable Swart.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, there's no doubt that the country is facing dire fiscal outlook as set out by the Minister and as set out in the National Treasury documentation. The prospects for economic growth are set out as well, but the consolidated gross national debt, as other speakers have indicated, is almost all-consuming at this stage, with debt service costs set to crowd out other expenditure. Now, the ACDP appreciates that there are severe risks to the fiscal outlook, and these include the projections as to economic growth, and of course, the aspects that already have been printed or penciled in as savings, such as the public service compensation, which is still subject to litigation, and the forthcoming wage negotiations, and of course, the additional fiscal pressures from state-owned companies, social security funds, and municipalities. Now, the question to be posed is to what degree are the projections set out by National Treasury credible, given that previous projections, such as pertaining to economic growth, were not realized. Obviously, from our perspective, we would like to see them being realized, as this would avoid what many have referred to as a sovereign debt crisis, and that must be avoided at all costs. The risks are set out by National Treasury, and then one asks the question, how does one strike the balance between what many economists are calling for, increased spending to stimulate economic growth, and the Minister's austerity path? From the ACDP's perspective, there can be no doubt that debt stabilization path is necessary. We cannot afford this escalating debt anymore. In this regard, however, the Cabinet, unfortunately, has got a poor track record of sticking to fiscal or savings targets suggested and recommended by National Treasury. The primary surplus, which is the goal by 2023, has not been achieved since 2008, when there was a long commodity boom. And given that the country is in the grip of the worst recession since the 1930s, obviously there's deep skepticism about whether extensive cuts and austerity measures and the economic growth figures will be achievable. The challenge then is, after a decade of looting and plundering state resources, the degree of fiscal austerity required has become so huge that it could throw the economy into reverse and ultimately prove self-defeating. From the ACDP's perspective, there have been various solutions have been mentioned from this platform. We again would like to emphasize the facts of the billions of rands that are sitting in overseas bank accounts that can be collected. And it was referred to earlier by Honourable Natasha Mazzoni and Minister Gordon about the state capture inquiry. I was also part of that. Let us equip our law resources and our law enforcement with the special unit, the tribunal, to collect those billions of rands that can help balance the budget. That is the way to go, and that is what we have suggested continually, and we'd ask you, Minister, to consider that as well. I thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Kwankwa.
Before Honorable Kwankwa, Honorable Deputy Speaker.
Yes, Deputy Chief Whip.
Honorable Speaker, I'll request that you check your clock because the previous speakers, Honorable Mautwe, you gave her extra 1 minute 25 seconds. Then the Freedom Front Plus member, you gave him 44 seconds. And Honorable Swart, 13 seconds. So please check the clock. I thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Whip. I will address you on that matter. Honorable Kwankwa, go ahead.
Thank you very much. And that intervention is unfortunately made shortly before I start my speech. It probably has to do with what I'm
just
going
in
to
time.
say. Amasela and Oyeka. You see, I want to highlight one issue on behalf of the United Democratic Movement. I think there's a lot that can still be done as a party on this loan guarantee scheme, which doesn't seem to be working properly. Remember, part of the problem here is that banks are conflicted to a large extent, if we were to consider that. If a client comes in, wants to apply for funding, and they want to access the loan guarantee scheme, and the bank can, because remember, banks are not allowed to profit on the loan guarantee scheme. So if a client comes in, wants to access the facility, what are they going to do? Give them the loan guarantee scheme or extend their own credit because they are in the business of making money as well. So you can't expect them to, it will be altruistic to expect them to actually be naive, rather, to expect them to be extremely patriotic insofar as this is concerned, because they have to watch their return on equity as well. Now, it means that one of the issues that must be done perhaps for the banks, commercial banks, is to provide them with specific targets, sectoral targets, because government, because you keep on saying you are interacting with the social partners, surely by now you should understand which sectors are struggling and why, and therefore it should be possible to balkanize, to actually try and allocate some of the funding, the loan guarantee scheme, to say a certain portion of it should be targeted to this industry, where you know that, for example, the labor, some of the sectors are labor intensive. The other issue which we think that the committee was quite correct in pointing out and recommending is the fact that this loan guarantee scheme must be made available to the DFIs so that they can actually be able to extend funding facilities, or facilities rather, to some of the projects that they're undertaking. But it would also be good to consider how that facility, the loan guarantee scheme, can operate in the, I know the post office bank has actually fallen completely apart, but looking at some solutions so that we are not, as Honorable Hope Papo likes to point out, at the mercy of the markets. I think the current solution leaves us at the mercy of the markets. It depends on their mood and how they want to actually implement the scheme. What also concerns us, we've pointed this out when President Bantu Olomisa issued a statement responding to the stimulus package. One of the things he highlighted there specifically was that the central bank can and should still play an increased role. We should start a debate about quantitative easing. We've seen banks around the world, central banks around the world, being aggressive insofar as this is concerned, buying bonds on the market, trying to stabilize markets. Yes, the central bank started this process, but I think it left it halfway. We need to be more aggressive insofar as this is concerned. Look, as center-left parties, we should be concerned when our focus is on reducing expenditure at times at the expense of important socio-economic expenditure. Because our people sent us here in order to represent them, not to say cut expenditure at all costs. What seems to be happening at this point in time is an overemphasis on reducing debt and cutting expenditure, even at the expense of taking some of that.
Your time has expired.
Thank you.
Bengithi uyijongile nje.
2 seconds kum ndiqondile nizandiqhatha.
Honorable, is ATM here? Clearly they are not here. Honorable Sheikh Imam.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Thank you very much for the opportunity. The Minister stated the South African economy was now in the danger zone, and any further fiscal slippage could lead to debt reaching 100% of GDP or even greater. The minister went on further to claim that the aim is to stabilize South Africa's debt in 3 years. I'm not sure how he's going to do that. The minister's statement in terms of the medium-term budget policy statement is actually the ideal. There is no doubt about that. Whether it is achievable is something else, and clearly in this case it is not achievable. Now, Deputy Speaker, unless we change direction in the way we conduct ourselves, there is no doubt about one thing, that in years to come, and that's very soon, we will reach a fiscal cliff, the country will be bankrupt, and I can assure you we wouldn't even have money to pay grants, we wouldn't even have money to pay pensions in South Africa, because we've already set a precedent on socially dependent state where most people want to be given social assistance rather than creating a conducive environment to boost the economy and get people to go out there and be actively, proactively involved and create jobs. Now, the 10.5 billion, very it results in partners in such as education, police, and health. Now, if you look at what has happened recently and how the crime rate has shot in the country, and you are now reducing the budget for the South African police services, you can imagine what is going to happen in the country with over 2.2 million people already having lost their jobs. Now, it is expected that we are going to, at some stage in the near future, go to 95% of GDP in terms of our debt. Now, when the minister says that on the one hand he is going to reduce debt in 3 years, on the other hand the projection is moving now to 95%. Remember, there's not even an agreement in place when it talks about reducing compensation to employees, and the unions will hold government to ransom. You have never entered into an agreement. You were not even able to sit at the table for the last couple of years and come up with anything concrete. And how are you going to reduce that? On the one hand, you talk about reducing them. On the other hand, you talk about creating 363,000 public sector jobs. It is not the responsibility of the state to create jobs. It is the responsibility of the state to create a conducive environment for the public, for the private sector to create jobs. But indeed, we want to take on all these responsibilities when it is. One of the solutions, Deputy Speaker, if we don't want to run into a fiscal cliff, reduce this country to a two-tier state, a national and a district, do away with local, do away with provinces. That's one of the solutions that you might have if you want to actually reduce the cost, because the amount of money that we spend just on compensation to employees, and it's really totally not sustainable in South Africa any further or any longer.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Thank you.
You run off my time, Ash. I'm sorry.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
Yes. AIC, PAC, Al-Jama.
Thank you very much, Honourable Deputy Speaker. Honourable Deputy Speaker, government has over the past 3 decades ensured that grandfather clauses, undertakings and commitments have been properly funded to ensure our transition to democracy. But shortcomings, there are still shortcomings. The several fiscal frameworks which we had over the 6 parliaments continues to delay commitments by the Truth and Conciliation Commission that government must provide urgent and adequate resources, including ring-fenced budgets, speed up decisions on which inquest of atrocities committed during the apartheid era must be reopened, and which cases must be prosecuted, and of course which cases are still viable to be prosecuted, as many witnesses and defendants have died. This, some say, is a shortcoming while loved ones are waiting for justice. Mama Halima Harun is such a loved one, and she did not receive justice, and we mourn her death, and we still wait for a decision whether or not to reopen that question into her husband's untimely death. It is not enough for government like they did today to advise the nation like the Minister of Justice and Correctional Service has done in a written reply to Al-Jama today, while we are debating this revised fiscal framework, that apartheid-era cases will be prioritized and centralized after he has engaged thoroughly with the Director of National Prosecutions. Deputy Speaker, government must show the nation money is properly ring-fenced in the fiscal framework to give effect to the commitment given by the TRC Commission. Al-Jamaa calls on the Minister of Finance to ring-fence the money needed to at least identify the apartheid atrocity inquest to be reopened. We cannot allow fiscal frameworks over the years to be tarnished by ignoring the very serious obligation of this government that is now long overdue. It is not right to let the obligation be further delayed and lapse as more and more witnesses defend and die. Al-Jamaa supports the report of the Portfolio Committee and compliments it on the job well done, but humbly brings the shortcoming to them. Just like apartheid-era atrocities now enjoy priority attention of the new Director of Public Prosecution, it should also be a priority and top of mind of the Portfolio Committee that gives the leadership the sixth power looks forward to, especially to prioritize spending.
Thank you very much.
Honourable Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Hendrikse. Honourable Mabileza.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Honourable members, today, the 11th November, we stand together with the Angolan people in celebrating their 45th anniversary of a liberated independence from Portuguese colonial rule on this day, the 11th November 1975. In October 1976, the Liberation Movement and governing party MPLA, its central committee stated the following, close quote, "It is necessary to create a people's democratic state and construct its material and technical foundations," close quote. 45 years on, we in the Republic of South Africa are faced with the same fundamental responsibilities. For the MPLA, it was to build socialism as a party of labor. For the governing party, the African National Congress, it is the building of a national democratic society on the basis of a theory of a democratic developmental state. So the ANC's choices as a governing party on behalf of the masses of people who brought it to power and the MPLA's choices in 1975 are bound together by an understanding that we are constructing a future in a condition that were not of our making, but rather condition created colonial rule both in Angola and in South Africa. In South Africa, it was further aggravated by a corrupt apartheid, so carried on the tradition of accumulating economic wealth to whites exclusively and whoever supported them in general. And so, what are the lessons we need to learn from this? For today's revised fiscal framework debate, firstly, we are dealing with a concentrated form of economics when we refer to a fiscal framework and revenue to generate funds to finance a governing party policy framework, which is firmly rooted in an elections manifesto supported by the people. Secondly, applied economics is about political choices we have to make, not under conditions of our making, but rather as a result of global and domestic economic hegemony. Thirdly, the choices we have to make as the governing party are informed by the scientific balance of evidence against our policy and philosophical orientation. Therefore, no amount of narrow ideological hollowing as we have had today from the party of neoliberalism and from the true evidence-based decision-making of the governing party on that matter of the revised fiscal framework and revenue proposal. Fourthly, we have an economic recovery and reconstruction plan that draws much of its content and existing policy programs of government, and therefore the revised fiscal framework must speak to this economic plan. Fifthly, as public representatives, we stand here to advance the people's interest as their democratic representatives. We are not here to do the bidding of any interest group or the private sector as parliamentarians. We are here to provide a platform for ideas to be tabled as a people's democracy. Be listened to, ideas engaged, and in the philosophy of our constitution, which, whilst the voice of the minority must be heard, the will of the people majority must prevail. Otherwise, why have elections in the first place? Sixthly, be very wary of those who come to the podium and claim that they have the economic answer to our economic challenges, who speak in the obsolete terms as if nothing is relative. Everything is relative and nothing is absolute. Be informed by those who have had to manage an economic system, who have to run a country, who have to take decisions mindful of the consequences of every decision. Be informed by those who have had to apply the human science called political economy and can speak from experience, not those who have never had to take responsibility for the consequences of their slogans. Be informed by those who have made mistakes and are honest enough to say we need a new direction. This we know is the tradition of the ANC. Honest enough to admit where we have made an error of judgment and honest enough to be open about it. Seventh, the revised fiscal framework and revenue proposal. We appreciate the statutory institutions, the fiscal framework commissions, and the parliamentary budget office for your informed inputs. On the public hearings, greater guidance from the committee sections of parliament must be given to the participants so that we make the distinction between hearings on a fiscal framework and revenue proposal and those for appropriation and the division of revenue. Critical issues that are going to have to seize ourselves with the between now and the February 2020 budget are the credibility of the overall fiscal framework given the outstanding wage bargaining agreement and the deteriorating fiscal position of state-owned enterprises. Whether we do not need a much broader relief or stimulus package given the deepening levels of poverty. In this regard, we need to examine far more closely a gathering global acknowledgement that public sector action in the form of fiscal and monetary stimulus remain vital to avert further economic decline. A far deeper commitment to the quality of expenditure. The quarterly reviews by committees in Parliament have got to ensure through oversight that we get a far higher level of quality on expenditure. That on public finances management, the costing of pricing of functions and aligned public finance and outputs must be informed by an impact assessment of outcomes. We are, of course, mindful of the decision by Treasury to make a shift from consumption to capital expenditure. The concern must, of course, be what impact will this have on the Human Development Index. We need to do a far deeper analysis of the shifts. In the short time we have had, as some of these are not necessarily frontline functions and services, but administrative savings which may not affect the core programs. Our hearings have once again raised the question of both fiscal and monetary policy linked to revenue options. It must remain our view, which has been previously expressed, that the debate of fiscal policy is both necessary and important. The study of evidence-based research provided necessary and important. The study of evidence-based research provided during this exercise demonstrates that over the 2013 to 2019 fiscal consolidation period, low government expenditure into the economy accompanied by declining public corporation investment had a negative impact on aggregate demand and public sector investment levels. On monetary policy, we saw the benefits of quantitative easing from the SA Reserve Bank when it lowered the interest rate but we would go on to say that making the cost of our debt cheaper is in the interest of government, business, and broader society.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Thank you. Your time has expired. Thank you. Honourable Minister.
Deputy Speaker, I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Thank you very much, sir. Honourable Deputy Speaker and honourable members from both sides of the benches of Parliament, and those who are joining us, like me, from the technological platforms. First of all, let me express my very sincere gratitude to Honourable Maswanganyi and his committee for the sterling work which they have done to get us where we are in terms of processing the huge material before them, which was submitted by myself and my colleagues and the staff at the National Treasury as part of the medium-term budget policy statement. I very much regret that the time for considering this material was very short, but I thank them for the commitment to do the work that they needed to do. I also thank the presiding officers of Parliament for scheduling this debate and discussion in Parliament to allow us to proceed with our work, since time is of the essence in getting these processes going forward.
Hello. Mamela, let me call you back when I'm chairing the session.
Deputy Speaker, you're not muted.
You're out of order, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
My apologies.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Let me indicate that the medium-term budget policy statement was presented against the backdrop of a global economy which is in recession. The latest projections by the IMF through their World Economic Outlook indicate that the world economy is expected to decline by 4.4% in 2020. The sub-Saharan African economy is expected to decline by 3%. Our own economy is expected to contract now by 7.8%. Now, this is a National Treasury estimate. World trade volumes, trading between and amongst nations, is expected to contract by minus 10.4%. But of course, there is the forecast that if all of us continue doing what we need to do to revitalize and reconstruct the global and domestic economy, the world economy could bounce back in 2021 by positive 5.2%. The African economy could bounce back by plus 3.1%, and the South African economy could bounce back by 3.3%. Already we can see some green shoots in parts of the economy, in manufacturing, in mining, in wholesale trade, in retail trade. Agriculture obviously stayed afloat. We can see evidence of green shoots in transport and logistics and other activities. So if we continue along the path of driving through our reconstruction and recovery program, we stand a good chance of a bounce back in 2021, which is good news. Now, of course, the decline in our gross domestic product has also meant that our revenue collection has gone down. We now estimate that revenue is going to decline probably by some 322 billion rand thereabouts, which is about 8.7 billion rand more than we thought in June. This worries us a lot because the pressure on the expenditure side is still great, and yet on the revenue side, we're seeing a decline. So there's a funding gap that is there for us, and it's a very, very serious concern. And that's why the debt to GDP ratio is increasing, and we're getting worried about it. And if we don't do anything about fiscal consolidation, we run the real risk that we are going to face a debt to GDP ratio of over 100% in the next 3-4 years. So we need to do something to consolidate our fiscal position in order not to get to that position. Therefore, the principal conversation in this medium-term budget policy statement has been fiscal consolidation, support for the economic reconstruction and recovery program, and making sure that we rein in the debt situation. It is within that context, honorable members, that I would really like to thank you very much for your contributions, for your inputs. The usual politicking thing aside, there were some very good points being made by some members, which I really, truly appreciate. And I thank you very much for that. And given the lateness of the hour and the fact that the President of the Republic is about to address the nation, I don't think I need to take the matter further. I conclude, Deputy Speaker, on a very sad note. As I'm sure you have heard, our Auditor General, Mr. Kimi Makwetu, has passed on, very sadly, passed on this afternoon, and he worked very well with the committee and SCOPA and Parliament, worked very hard to get the government finances to be properly audited, and I'm sure we'll miss him in the financial world, in the auditing world. I'm sure Parliament will find an appropriate opportunity to pay tribute to him, and my sincere condolences to his family and to his friends and colleagues, and also to the parliamentarians with whom he worked. Deputy Speaker, I thank you very much once again.
Thank you very much, Minister. And the way you ended, you are indeed right. Attention has been brought to us about that sad news, and Parliament at the appropriate moment will convey and discuss the matter. Honorable Chief Whip, what do you say? It's your turn to advise us on the report.
Thanks, Honorable Deputy Speaker. I move that the report be adopted.
Is there any objection to the report being adopted?
Deputy Speaker, it's Natasha Mazzoni from the DA. Please note the objection of the Democratic Alliance.
Of the EFF. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Okay, yes, the DA, EFF.
ACDP as well, thank you.
Okay.
The United Democratic.
ACDP as well.
UDM.
Okay, UDM.
Plus as well.
Yes. Sorry, I didn't hear that. The last one. Sorry?
Freedom Front Plus, objection.
Freedom Front Plus, okay, all right. But we'll note those, and the report is therefore agreed to. And this brings us to the end of the day. The House is adjourned.
Malibongwe, long live Malibongwe. Malibongwe.